If tonight you feel trapped inside your own thoughts, unable to rest, unable to silence the fear, and unable to find anyone who truly understands, remain here for a while, because Saint Maximilian Kolbe knew what it meant to live inside a darkness that seemed to have no door. He knew the ache of separation, the uncertainty of an unknown future, the weakness of the body, and the terrible loneliness of being surrounded by suffering while longing for home. Yet even in the darkest place, his heart was not abandoned. Even where human beings tried to strip away every sign of dignity, faith, and hope, Maximilian discovered that love could still remain free. Tonight, you do not have to solve everything that is troubling you. You do not have to understand why this night has been so difficult. You do not have to force sleep to come, or pretend that you are stronger than you feel. For now, you may simply remain here, listening to the story of a man who carried the presence of Christ into places where fear seemed to rule everything. Perhaps your room feels very small tonight. Perhaps the silence has made every worry louder. Perhaps you are carrying a conversation you cannot stop replaying, a diagnosis you cannot forget, a person you cannot reach, or a future you cannot control. Perhaps you have prayed and heard only silence in return. Saint Maximilian Kolbe also knew the silence of unanswered questions. He knew that the path of faith was not always marked by comfort, but he learned, slowly and through many years, that the heart can be held even when it cannot feel held. So let his story come near to you now, gently, like the light of a distant window in the last hours of night. Let it move slowly through the room. Let it remind you that the presence of God is not measured by the peace you happen to feel at this moment. Long before he was known as Maximilian, before the camp, before the prison walls, before the final act of charity that would carry his name throughout the world, he was a boy called Raymond Kolbe. And like every child, he began not with a legend, but with a home.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
The boy who heard the call of Mary. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world seems to have withdrawn from you, it can be comforting to remember that every great life began in an ordinary place. Before the statues, before the stories told in churches, before the paintings that show him with a calm face and a Franciscan habit, Saint Maximilian Kolbe was a child growing up in a modest Polish family. He was not born already carrying the appearance of a saint. He did not enter the world surrounded by music or public recognition. He was born into the simple mystery of a household, into the care of parents who worked, prayed, worried, and hoped, as parents have done in every generation. His name was Raymond. He was born in the late 19th century, in a Poland that carried the memory of suffering in its soil. The country was divided between empires, and its people knew what it meant for a nation to live under powers it did not choose. There were political tensions, poverty, hard labor, and uncertainty. Yet there were also kitchens warmed by bread, hands folded in prayer, children running through narrow streets, bells sounding from parish churches, and families teaching one another how to endure. The world into which Raymond was born was not free from fear, but neither was it free from tenderness. His parents, Julius and Maria Kolbe, belonged to a working family whose faith was not a decoration placed upon life from the outside. It belonged to the rhythm of life itself. Prayer was present alongside work. The cross was present beside the table. The memory of God was carried into ordinary tasks, into fatigue, into sickness, into the raising of children, and into the decisions that had to be made when there was not enough money or enough certainty. This is where the story begins. Not in triumph, but in a home. And perhaps that is important for you tonight. You may believe that your life is too ordinary for God to notice. You may look at your present circumstances and see only repetition. The same room, the same worries, the same unfinished tasks, the same ache returning when night falls. You may think that nothing sacred can grow in a life that feels so routine. But Raymond's story began in precisely that kind of hidden place. The first seeds of his vocation were not planted beneath bright lights. They were planted among family concerns, childhood emotions, daily work, and the quiet presence of faith. The household in which he grew was not a place where every day was easy. His parents knew the pressure of making a living. They knew what it meant to be responsible for one another. Their faith did not remove every difficulty, but it gave those difficulties a direction. The family did not have the luxury of pretending that suffering was unreal. They lived close enough to hardship to know that prayers must sometimes be spoken while tired, that trust must sometimes be chosen while afraid, and that love is often expressed through perseverance rather than grand declarations. A child learns more than words from a home. A child learns what the adults do with fear. Raymond would have seen the way his parents carried responsibility. He would have observed the expressions that crossed their faces when money was scarce or when the future seemed uncertain. He would have noticed the difference between a day of abundance and a day of want. He would have heard the sounds of household work, the movement of objects, the preparation of food, the opening and closing of doors, the quiet conversations that children do not always understand but never completely forget. He would also have known the atmosphere of prayer. Perhaps there were moments when the house became still, when voices lowered, when attention turned toward the invisible God. Perhaps the rosary moved from hand to hand. Perhaps the name of Mary was spoken with the familiarity of someone who belonged to the family's deepest trust. For a child, faith can first appear as a sound in the home before it becomes a theology in the mind. It can be the murmuring of a prayer from another room. It can be the sight of a mother pausing before an image. It can be the way a father bows his head. It can be a candle burning while the rest of the room grows dark. These small impressions can remain in the soul for years. Raymond was intelligent, energetic, and sensitive. He possessed a vivid inner life, and vivid inner lives are not always easy to manage. Children who feel deeply may also become easily frustrated. They may move quickly between joy and discouragement. They may desire goodness sincerely and yet struggle with impatience, fear, or the need to be noticed. They may appear difficult when, beneath the surface, they are simply trying to understand the size of their own emotions. The saints were not born without human complexity. They were not empty vessels waiting for holiness to be poured into them. They were people with particular temperaments, wounds, strengths, questions, and limitations. Grace did not erase their humanity. Grace entered it. This means that if your mind is restless tonight, you are not disqualified from the love of God. If you are easily overwhelmed, if you carry old shame, if you are tired of beginning again, you are not outside the reach of grace. God does not wait for you to become a different kind of person before drawing near. He meets you within the person you are, even while slowly leading you toward healing. Raymond grew up beneath the influence of a deeply Catholic culture, but the faith that would shape his future was not merely inherited. At some point, inherited faith must become personal. A child must begin to ask what the prayers mean. A young person must face the mystery of suffering. A soul must begin to wonder whether God is not only the God of parents, priests, churches, and sacred images, but also the God of the hidden places inside one's own heart. Raymond was still young when a profound spiritual experience marked him. The account traditionally associated with his childhood describes a vision of the Virgin Mary. In that vision, Mary held two crowns, one white and one red. The white crown represented purity, and the red crown represented martyrdom. She asked him, in the language of the heart, which one he would choose. Raymond chose both. The scene has been told many times, but it deserves to be approached slowly. It is not merely a dramatic story about a child who was shown his future. It is a mystery about the way God can place a calling within a person before that person understands what the calling will require. A child can say yes without knowing the entire cost of yes. Raymond could not have understood the full meaning of martyrdom. He could not have imagined the roads he would travel, the people he would serve, the illnesses he would endure, the violence he would witness, or the prison cell where his final sacrifice would take place. He could not have known the name of the man whose life he would one day protect. He could not have seen the walls of Auschwitz or the faces of the prisoners. He was a child. And yet, in the simplicity of that vision, something was placed before him. A life belonging entirely to God. The white crown and the red crown were not two separate lives, as though one were peaceful and the other terrible. They belonged together. Purity was not presented as escape from suffering. Suffering was not presented as a rejection of purity. The two crowns revealed a single movement of love, a heart made clear enough to give itself. The white crown can be understood as the quiet work of allowing the heart to become undivided. It is the life of prayer, discipline, obedience, truthfulness, and hidden fidelity. It is the refusal to let bitterness become the final authority over the soul. The red crown can be understood as the moment when love becomes costly. It is not a search for pain. It is not the belief that suffering is valuable merely because it hurts. It is the willingness to remain faithful when faithfulness demands something real. Raymond chose both, but he did not yet know how the choice would unfold. Perhaps there was a silence after the vision. Perhaps the ordinary world returned. The room, the furniture, the household sounds, the familiar faces. A child may experience something immense and then still be expected to eat, sleep, answer questions, and continue with the day. Heaven may touch the soul, and the next morning may still require small acts of obedience. This too resembles your own life. You may have had moments when you knew something deeply, moments of prayer or clarity that seemed to open a window inside you. And then the moment passed. The dishes remained. The illness remained. The difficult relationship remained. The anxiety returned. You may have wondered whether the grace was real, because ordinary life did not immediately change. But a vision does not always change the landscape around us. Sometimes it changes the direction in which we walk through the landscape. Raymond would spend many years learning what his childhood yes meant. The meaning would not arrive all at once. It would emerge through study, discipline, friendship, illness, service, travel, and prayer. The red crown would not appear every morning. The white crown would be shaped through countless ordinary decisions, through the patience required to live with others, through the effort to remain charitable when misunderstood, through the surrender of plans when health or circumstances interfered. Most callings are understood in retrospect. While we are living them, they may feel like fragments. One day is a conversation, another is a disappointment, another is a small act of forgiveness, another is the decision to continue praying when prayer feels empty, another is the courage to apologize, another is the patience to remain beside someone who is suffering. Only later may these fragments reveal that God was leading the soul through a single path. Raymond eventually felt drawn toward religious life. The Franciscan vocation offered a way of living the gospel through poverty, fraternity, prayer, study, and service. To enter such a life meant leaving behind familiar expectations. It meant allowing one's future to be shaped by a rule, a community, and a promise. For a young person, this kind of departure is never merely geographical. It is emotional. A home carries the shape of one's childhood. It holds the places where one was corrected, comforted, fed, and known. Leaving home can mean stepping into a future that is not yet visible, while carrying the voices of those who raised you. It can mean discovering that love does not disappear when one leaves, but that love changes form. There may have been concern in the Kolbe household. A parent can be proud of a child's vocation and still feel afraid. Religious devotion does not cancel the ache of separation. A mother can trust God and still feel the empty space left by a departing son. A father can bless a decision and still wonder what hardships await. This is one of the quiet truths of consecration. It is not only the person who leaves who must surrender. Those who love that person may also be asked to place the future into God's hands. If you have ever watched someone leave, you may understand this. Perhaps someone moved away. Perhaps a child grew up. Perhaps a marriage ended. Perhaps death took someone from you. Perhaps a friendship faded without a clear explanation. There are many forms of departure, and each one leaves a room inside the heart that must be entered carefully. Raymond's departure was a movement toward God, but it was still a departure. He entered formation among the conventual Franciscans and began a life of study and discipline. The young man, who had once been a boy in a Polish home, now found himself learning how to live within a religious community. This required more than enthusiasm. It required patience with people whose personalities differed from his own. It required obedience when his preferences were not followed. It required perseverance when the first excitement of a new vocation gave way to routine. The holiness of community life is often discovered in repetition. One rises when the bell rings. One attends prayer even when tired. One fulfills duties even when one would rather be elsewhere. One learns to accept correction. One encounters the weaknesses of others, and eventually, one's own weaknesses reflected back. A monastery or friary can become a place of profound consolation, but it is not a place without human friction. The saints did not become holy by living among people who never disappointed them. They became holy by learning how to love actual people. Raymond's religious name, Maximilian Mary, pointed toward the devotion that would become central to his life. The name of Mary was not for him an ornament. It indicated a spiritual path, to receive Christ, to belong to Christ, and to allow the heart to be shaped by the humility and courage of Christ's mother. Mary's presence in Maximilian's life was protective, but not in the sense of promising a life without pain. A mother does not always remove the difficult road. Sometimes she accompanies the child along it. Sometimes she teaches the child how to remain tender while walking through places that could make the heart hard. For you tonight, Mary may be approached in the same way. You may not be asking for a life without difficulty. Perhaps that seems too distant. Perhaps you are only asking for enough strength to make it through the next few hours. Perhaps you are asking for protection over your family, a quieting of your thoughts, or the ability to stop fearing what tomorrow may bring. You may simply say, "Mary, stay near me." That prayer is enough to begin. Maximilian's devotion did not lead him away from the world's suffering. It led him toward it. He believed that Mary always directed the soul toward Jesus, and that genuine devotion would produce charity, courage, and service. To come near Mary was to learn how to stand near the wounded Christ, present in wounded people. This is why his vocation would eventually take an active form. He was not content to preserve faith as a private feeling. He wanted the message of the gospel to reach people who were confused, hostile, discouraged, or far from the church. He saw that many people were being shaped by ideas that denied the dignity of the human person and the presence of God. During his years of study in Rome, Maximilian encountered a world of intellectual debate, religious conflict, and rapid social change. Rome was ancient and immense. Its streets carried the marks of many centuries. Stone walls held the memory of empires, martyrs, bishops, pilgrims, and ordinary people who had walked beneath the same sky. For a young friar from Poland, the city must have felt both overwhelming and full of possibility. There were churches in abundance, chapels opening into quiet corners, bells sounding over streets, and libraries holding more books than one person could read in a lifetime. There were also crowds, noise, political tensions, and the pressure of modern ideas challenging the faith of many people. Maximilian studied theology and philosophy, and he also took an interest in science. His mind was not afraid of questions. He did not believe that faith required the refusal to think. He sought to understand the world so that he could serve it more intelligently. This aspect of his life can be comforting to those who feel divided within themselves. Perhaps you have been told that your questions make you less faithful. Perhaps you are troubled by the tension between what you believe and what you experience. Perhaps you are an analytical person who feels awkward in moments of devotion, or a deeply emotional person who feels inadequate when faith becomes intellectual. Maximilian's life reminds us that the human person is not divided into separate compartments. The mind can seek truth, the heart can seek love, the body can grow tired, and the soul can still belong to God through all of it. You do not have to become less intelligent in order to trust God. You do not have to become less sensitive in order to be strong. You do not have to stop asking questions before God can receive you. The Lord is not threatened by the truth of your interior life. In Rome, Maximilian and several fellow friars formed the militia of the Immaculata. The name expressed a desire to place themselves at the service of Mary, so that more people might come to know Christ. Their intention was not to create a private circle of spiritual perfection. It was to engage a wounded world with the truth and mercy of the gospel. The world they saw was marked by hostility toward religion and by ideologies that treated human beings as objects to be managed. They believed that prayer, consecration, education, and charity could become forms of spiritual resistance. Their movement began with small numbers and limited means. It was not backed by the power of the world. Its first strength was conviction. This is often how God begins important work, not with abundance, but with a few people willing to give what they have. A small group, a borrowed room, a simple prayer, a person who says yes while still afraid, a listener lying awake at night and whispering the name of Jesus, a parent who continues to care for a difficult child, a sick person who offers one honest prayer, a friend who sends a message to someone who has become isolated. The world may not notice these beginnings, but God does. Maximilian's work would later grow remarkably, yet its foundation remained personal. Every large movement is made of individual hearts. Every printed page reaches one reader at a time. Every prayer is offered by one person, even when many are praying together. That matters when you feel insignificant. You may be tempted to think that your life has little spiritual meaning because no one sees what you carry. But the hidden offering is still an offering. The prayer spoken in the night is still heard. The act of enduring without becoming cruel is still a form of courage. The decision to remain gentle when you have been wounded is not small in the eyes of heaven. As Maximilian's vocation developed, Mary became increasingly associated with the whole direction of his life. He did not imagine holiness as self-invention. He wanted to be available to God, as Mary had been available at the Annunciation, at Bethlehem, at the foot of the cross, and in the early days of the Church. Availability can be frightening. To be available to God means that we do not control every detail of what comes next. We can make plans, but we cannot command the future. We can prepare, but we cannot guarantee results. We can pray for protection, but we cannot dictate the precise shape that protection will take. For someone struggling with anxiety, this can feel almost impossible. Anxiety often says that safety will come only when every possibility has been examined and controlled. It insists that if you think long enough, you can prevent every disaster. It keeps watch when the body is begging for rest. Maximilian's spirituality offers a different path. It does not ask you to deny danger or pretend that everything is fine. It asks you to place the unknown future into hands stronger than your own. The child Raymond did not know what both crowns would mean. The young friar Maximilian did not know every demand that would come with his vocation. The missionary did not know every obstacle waiting in distant lands. The prisoner did not know how the war would end. At each stage, he received only enough light for the next step. Perhaps that is all you are being asked to receive tonight. Not the answer to every question. Not a guarantee that nothing painful will happen. Not an explanation for every loss. Only the grace for this moment. In time, Maximilian returned to Poland. The journey back was not the return of a triumphant figure with every problem solved. He came with knowledge, vision, and determination, but also with health limitations and the ordinary difficulties of establishing a mission. His body was not always strong. Illness accompanied him at different points in his life, reminding him that spiritual zeal does not make a person invulnerable. This is an important part of his story because it prevents us from imagining him as someone who simply moved through the world untouched by human limitation. He knew what it was to have plans interrupted by the body. He knew that illness could diminish energy, alter schedules, and create dependence upon others. There is a particular loneliness in physical weakness. A person may feel that the body has become an obstacle to the life they want to live. They may become impatient with themselves. They may feel guilty for needing help. They may fear that others will grow tired of them. They may wonder whether God is disappointed because they can no longer do what they once did. If that is part of your experience, let Maximilian's weakness speak gently to you. Your value is not measured by how much you produce. Your dignity is not reduced by fatigue. A day spent enduring pain may contain more love than a day filled with visible accomplishments. Rest is not a moral failure. Dependence does not make you less worthy of respect. Maximilian's mission would require him to accept the limits of his body while still offering his heart. He did not wait to become physically perfect before serving God. He served through the conditions he actually received. This is a quiet form of holiness, and it may be closer to your own life than you realize. The dream of establishing a great center dedicated to the Immaculate began through practical work. Land had to be found, buildings had to be planned, materials had to be carried, communities had to be organized, food had to be prepared, religious duties had to be fulfilled. There were schedules, disagreements, financial concerns, weather, fatigue, and mistakes. The city of the Immaculate did not appear in a single moment of inspiration. It grew through repeated effort. Imagine the early days of that place, the ground uneven beneath the feet, the smell of timber, the sound of tools, the roughness of work against the hands. Imagine friars moving through cold air, carrying boards or supplies, their habits brushing against unfinished walls. Imagine the sight of structures slowly rising, where once there had been only open land. The spiritual dream became physical. It acquired doors, windows, floors, tables, roofs, and corridors. It became a place where people could sleep, eat, pray, study, and work. This is often what God does with an interior calling. He gives it a shape in the world, but the shape is formed gradually. A desire to help becomes a conversation. A conviction becomes a habit. A prayer becomes a commitment. A hope becomes a place where another person can find refuge. Maximilian was a visionary, but his vision did not excuse him from ordinary labor. There is a temptation to admire saints only for their extraordinary moments. We prefer the dramatic scene, the heroic sacrifice, the unmistakable miracle. But most of Maximilian's life was made of unremarkable actions, repeated with faithfulness. He had to get up. He had to meet people. He had to listen. He had to study. He had to correct mistakes. He had to organize work. He had to endure fatigue. He had to pray when prayer felt difficult. He had to remain patient with those who did not immediately share his urgency. The same is true for you. Your holiness may be hidden in the tasks no one praises. It may be in preparing a meal while exhausted, caring for a parent, going to work while grieving, returning a call, managing medication, apologizing after losing patience, or choosing not to answer cruelty with cruelty. You may not feel spiritual while doing these things. You may feel only tired. But God is not limited to the moments when you feel inspired. He is present in faithful repetition. As the community grew, Maximilian became increasingly convinced that modern tools could be used for the service of the gospel. He saw the power of printed material to enter homes, reach distant people, and offer a voice in a culture filled with competing messages. The printing apostolate had a physical beauty of its own. There were pages stacked in careful piles, sheets passing through machinery, the sharp scent of ink, the metallic movement of type, and the constant rhythm of work. In a world before the instant communication that now surrounds us, a printed page required patience. It had to be written, prepared, produced, carried, and received. A message traveled slowly, but it could travel far. Perhaps someone opened a publication at a table after a long day. Perhaps they read beside a window while rain touched the glass. Perhaps they found a sentence that interrupted their despair. Perhaps a person who felt alone discovered that someone else had given words to the questions they carried. Maximilian believed that truth could become a form of mercy. This is one reason the story of his life can reach you tonight through narration. Words move across time. A person who died in 1941 can still accompany someone resting in a room many decades later. The printed page and the spoken story become bridges between souls who never meet in ordinary life. You may feel isolated because no one around you understands your particular pain. But the human heart is not as alone as it appears. Across generations, people have wrestled with fear, grief, temptation, doubt, and longing. The saints are not companions because they had identical experiences to ours. They are companions because they show us that no human experience is beyond the reach of God. Maximilian's work was active, but beneath it lay a disciplined life of prayer. He understood that activity without interior surrender could become another form of self-importance. The mission belonged to God, not to his personal reputation. This distinction matters. There is a difference between serving because one is loved and working in order to become worthy of love. The first brings freedom. The second brings exhaustion. If you have spent your life trying to earn approval, perhaps you know the second kind of work. You may continue doing more because you are afraid that stopping will reveal your inadequacy. You may carry responsibilities that no one asked you to carry. You may believe that rest must be purchased through achievement. But the gospel begins elsewhere. You are loved before you succeed. You are held before you understand. You belong to God before you become useful. Maximilian did not print, preach, travel, study, and organize in order to persuade God to love him. He acted because he believed he was already claimed by divine love. That belief did not make his work effortless. It gave the work a deeper center. When the community encountered difficulty, he could return to prayer. When health failed, he could remain a son. When people misunderstood him, he could remember that his identity did not depend entirely on their approval. The soul needs such a center. Without it, every criticism becomes a verdict and every failure becomes a sentence. With it, failure can still hurt, but it does not have the final word. Maximilian also possessed a missionary imagination. He wanted the message of Christ to cross borders. He did not believe that the gospel belonged only to one country, one language, or one kind of person. His heart was drawn beyond familiar surroundings. This desire eventually brought him to Japan. To travel to another country as a missionary required humility. One entered a world whose language, customs, and rhythms were not one's own. Familiar signs disappeared. Ordinary tasks became more complicated. One had to listen before speaking, observe before acting, and accept the discomfort of being a beginner. Imagine the streets of Nagasaki, the movement of people, the architecture, the slopes and mountains, the changing weather, the unfamiliar sounds. Imagine Maximilian and the friars beginning again, carrying their vocation into a culture they did not control. There would have been practical difficulties. There would have been language barriers. There would have been moments of loneliness. A missionary may be surrounded by people and still feel profoundly alone because the deepest parts of the heart cannot yet be expressed in the local language. Perhaps you have felt something like this even without crossing an ocean. You may have entered a new workplace, a new city, a new family situation, or a new season of life in which you no longer know how to speak naturally. You may have felt like a stranger among people who seem to understand the rules. You may have smiled outwardly while inwardly asking where you belonged. Maximilian's life in Japan reminds us that belonging can be built slowly. It begins with humility. It begins with presence. It begins with learning to love people before one can perfectly communicate with them. The missionary does not bring Christ into a place where Christ is absent. Christ is already present. The missionary learns to recognize him there. This can transform the way you look at your own night. Perhaps you think God has arrived only when you feel calm. Perhaps you believe his presence begins when the fear ends. But Christ is already present in the room where you are afraid. He is not waiting for the room to become peaceful before he enters it. The calm may come gradually. It may come in small degrees. But the presence of Christ does not depend upon your nervous system giving you permission to believe in it. Maximilian's devotion to Mary remained at the heart of his missionary work. Mary represented complete openness to God, but also the courage to remain faithful when obedience led into uncertainty. At Nazareth, Mary did not receive a complete map. She received a word. At Bethlehem, she did not receive an easy setting. She received a child amid poverty and danger. At the cross, she did not receive an explanation that removed grief. She remained present. For the sleepless heart, Mary's presence can be a quiet reassurance. You do not need to perform perfect prayer. You do not need to produce beautiful thoughts. You may simply imagine yourself beneath her care. You may remember the name of Jesus. You may allow a single sentence to pass through your mind. Holy Mary, stay with me. If thoughts interrupt, you have not failed. If fear returns, you have not lost the prayer. If sleep does not come immediately, you are still being accompanied. The rosary itself is a prayer of return. The mind wanders, and the fingers return. The heart becomes distracted, and the words begin again. The prayer does not demand an unbroken state of concentration. It offers a path back. This may be especially meaningful to anyone whose thoughts move quickly at night. You do not have to punish yourself for distraction. You do not have to become angry because the mind has wandered. Simply return, as gently as possible. Return to the name of Jesus. Return to Mary. Return to the awareness that you are not carrying the night alone. Maximilian's apostolate was born in a world of conflict. He saw hostility toward faith, but he did not answer hostility with a hunger for domination. His desire was that people be drawn toward truth and mercy. He understood that the world could be changed through hearts changed by grace. This did not mean withdrawing from reality. It meant entering reality without allowing it to define the deepest identity of the person. When the political atmosphere in Europe darkened, the community could not pretend that danger was far away. Poland was increasingly exposed to violence. The rise of Nazi power brought persecution, fear, and the destruction of ordinary security. The friars knew that their work and their very existence could be threatened. There is a kind of fear that grows slowly. It begins as troubling news, then familiar freedoms become restricted, then people disappear, then conversations become cautious, then one realizes that the world one knew is changing, and no prayer seems to make the threat vanish. The people of Maximilian's time lived through such fear. Many people today also live under different forms of uncertainty. War, political instability, violence, illness, economic pressure, family crisis, and the constant stream of frightening information can make the heart feel permanently alert. Perhaps you have been trying to sleep while the world feels unsafe. Perhaps you have read too much news, imagined too many possibilities, or felt helpless before events that affect millions of. Your mind may be trying to protect you by remaining awake. If so, be gentle with yourself. Your body may be attempting to guard you, even though its vigilance has become exhausting. You do not need to condemn yourself for being afraid. You may acknowledge the fear and still place it before God. Maximilian did not respond to approaching danger with the illusion that he could control history. He responded by remaining faithful within the sphere given to him. He continued to pray. He continued to serve. He continued to care for the people around him. This is not a small response. When the world becomes too large to fix, the next act of love becomes a form of clarity. You may not be able to repair every broken relationship tonight. You may not be able to change the decisions of governments, reverse the past, or guarantee the future of someone you love. But you may be able to place one person in prayer. You may be able to refuse one cruel thought. You may be able to turn off the screen, lay down the phone, and allow your body a little rest. You may be able to say, Jesus, I give you this night. That prayer does not solve everything. It does not need to. It is a small door, and sometimes a small door is enough for hope to enter. Maximilian's early life had already taught him that holiness would be a combination of crowns, purity and sacrifice, prayer and action, inner surrender and outward service. He did not yet know how the red crown would come to him, but the white crown was already being shaped through his daily life. It was shaped through the discipline of study. It was shaped through the humility of community. It was shaped through the acceptance of illness. It was shaped through the willingness to begin again in another country. It was shaped through the refusal to keep faith hidden from those who needed hope. The red crown would later be visible to the world. The white crown had been formed in secret. This is why your hidden life matters. The things no one sees are not spiritually empty. The moment when you choose not to send an angry message, the morning when you get out of bed while grieving, the night when you ask God for help instead of giving up, the quiet care you offer to someone who cannot repay you. These things may never become public stories, but they are known to God. You may be in a season where there is no visible achievement, no clear progress, and no evidence that your prayers are changing anything. It may feel as if you are only surviving, yet survival itself can become an offering when it is placed into the hands of Christ. Maximilian's journey did not move in a straight line from childhood vision to final sacrifice. It passed through ordinary days. It contained weakness and uncertainty. It included plans that had to be adjusted and projects that had to be built slowly. The saint did not become courageous by skipping fear. He became courageous by repeatedly giving fear to God. Perhaps you can do the same tonight. You do not have to feel fearless. You do not have to become suddenly calm. You do not have to force your heart into a state it has not yet reached. You can simply tell God the truth. Lord, I am afraid. Lord, I am tired. Lord, I do not know what to do. Lord, stay near me. There is no shame in these prayers. The Psalms are filled with them. The saints knew them. Mary carried them. Christ himself entered the depths of human anguish. If your prayer is only a sigh, let it be a sigh directed toward God. If your prayer is only the desire to pray, let that desire become prayer. If your prayer is only the willingness to remain here for another few minutes, let that willingness be received as an offering. Raymond Kolbe's childhood vision did not mean that he would never feel afraid. It meant that his fear would eventually be gathered into a larger love. The same possibility exists for you. Your anxiety is not your identity. Your loneliness is not your destiny. Your insomnia is not proof that God has forgotten you. The night may be long, but it is not infinite. The darkness may surround you, but it does not possess the whole of reality. Beyond the window, the earth continues turning. Somewhere, morning is already beginning. Somewhere, a light is rising behind the horizon, even while your room remains dark. And even before the dawn becomes visible, it is already on its way. Maximilian did not know how much of his life would be remembered. He did not know that people would one day speak his name in hospitals, prisons, homes, and churches. He did not know that his witness would become a source of comfort for those who feel imprisoned by fear. He only knew the next act of faithfulness. That may be all you need to know as well. The next moment, the next prayer, the next gentle breath, the next opportunity to allow your shoulders to soften. And if sleep comes, let it come without anxiety about whether it will last. If sleep does not come yet, let this time still be held within the mercy of God. Rest is not only the absence of wakefulness. Rest can also be the decision to stop fighting yourself. The child Raymond once stood before a mystery he could not understand. He saw 2 crowns and chose both. He could not see the road, but he trusted the one who was inviting him. Tonight, you also stand before a mystery. You may not know what tomorrow will ask of you. You may not know how a sorrow will be healed. You may not know whether a relationship will be restored, whether your body will improve, whether your fears will loosen, or whether you will ever again feel the peace you remember. But you can entrust the unknown to God. The Virgin Mary, whom Maximilian loved so deeply, is not far from the restless heart. She knows what it means to receive a future without a complete explanation. She knows what it means to protect a child, to flee danger, to endure uncertainty, to stand beneath sorrow. and to wait for God's promise through the long hours. Let her remain near you now. Let the name of Jesus become a quiet light. And let the story of Saint Maximilian Kolbe continue to unfold slowly, because the boy who chose both crowns was only beginning to understand what it meant to give his whole life to love. The city of the Immaculate and the work of love. The boy who had once stood before the mystery of the two crowns was becoming a young man with a clear direction, though the full meaning of that direction remained hidden from him. He had learned that a vocation was not a single moment of excitement. It was a long obedience. It was the gradual offering of one's mind, one's body, one's plans, one's limitations, and one's relationships to God. It was the willingness to be formed not only by beautiful prayers, but also by ordinary duties, misunderstandings, fatigue, and the slow discipline of living with other people. Raymond Kolbe had entered religious life with a generous heart. As brother Maximilian Mary, he began to discover that generosity had to be purified. It was not enough to desire great things for God. One had to learn how to accept small responsibilities without becoming impatient. One had to understand that the Lord could be served just as truly through a quiet task as through a visible achievement. This lesson is difficult for many people. The heart may dream of doing something meaningful, yet the day may present only errands, appointments, bills, repeated conversations, and duties that seem to lead nowhere. A person may long to change the world while struggling simply to answer a message, prepare food, make a decision, or rise from bed. Maximilian's life would become active and influential, but the foundation of his work was built through the same kind of small faithfulness that fills your own days. He studied, he prayed, he listened, he lived among brothers, he learned the habits of religious discipline. He discovered that enthusiasm could not carry a vocation by itself. There were mornings when the body felt unwilling. There were lessons that required concentration. There were duties that were not personally appealing. There were people whose habits differed from his own. There were moments when his ideas met resistance. A community is a place where a person's idealism encounters reality. It is easy to love humanity in the abstract. It is more demanding to love the individual person who interrupts your plans, misunderstands your words, leaves a task unfinished, or sees the world differently from you. Religious life did not protect Maximilian from this challenge. It placed him within it. The same is true of every home, friendship, workplace, and family. Perhaps you are tired tonight because you have spent years trying to love people who do not always make love easy. Perhaps you care for someone who is demanding, unpredictable, or unable to recognize what you do. Perhaps you have become weary of being the one who keeps forgiving, keeps explaining, keeps beginning again. Saint Maximilian's life does not offer a shallow command to feel affection at all time. It offers something deeper. The decision to remember the dignity of the other person, even when emotion is absent. Charity is not always warmth. Sometimes charity is restraint. Sometimes it is refusing to humiliate someone. Sometimes it is telling the truth without cruelty. Sometimes it is allowing another person to remain imperfect without making their imperfection the center of your identity. The young friar continued his formation with a mind capable of moving between theology, philosophy, and scientific questions. His intellectual gifts were not separate from his prayer. He believed that truth ultimately belonged to God, and that the human mind was not an enemy of faith, but one of the ways a person could seek the Creator. In the ancient city of Rome, Maximilian encountered the breadth of the Church. He saw people from different lands, speaking different languages, carrying different histories. He prayed in places where generations of Christians had prayed before him. The stones beneath his feet had known the footsteps of pilgrims, soldiers, merchants, religious, widows, children, and the poor. Rome could make a young man feel small. Its buildings rose with the confidence of centuries. Its churches held works of art more beautiful than anything he had known as a child. Its streets carried noise and movement. Its ruins reminded the visitor that even powerful civilizations eventually pass away. Within that setting, Maximilian was studying the questions that mattered to him. What is the human person? What is truth? What does it mean for God to enter history? How should a Christian respond when the world rejects the gospel? How can the church speak to people who no longer listen? He did not want faith to remain locked inside old habits. He wanted it to be alive, intellectually serious, and capable of reaching people in the conditions of the modern world. He was aware that many people were becoming distant from religion. Some were turning toward political ideologies that promised to replace God. Others were wounded by hypocrisy or scandal. Some had never received a convincing explanation of faith. Some were lonely, angry, and searching for a meaning that the world around them could not provide. Maximilian believed that the answer was not fear, but consecrated love. With several fellow friars, he helped establish the militia of the Immaculate. The purpose was to place themselves entirely in the service of the Virgin Mary, so that, through her, more people might be led to Christ. The language of a spiritual militia could sound severe to modern ears, but the heart of the movement was not a desire to injure or dominate. It was a call to spiritual courage. The members were invited to become instruments of prayer, truth, and conversion. Their battlefield was the human heart. Their weapons were faithfulness, sacrifice, communication, and charity. They wanted to stand against the forces that led human beings away from God, but they did not believe that people were enemies to be despised. The person who was confused, hostile, or distant from faith was still a person loved by God. That distinction is essential. A Christian may oppose an idea without hating the person who holds it. A believer may defend truth without taking pleasure in another person's humiliation. A soul may be firm without becoming hard. Maximilian's devotion to Mary taught him this balance. Mary was gentle, but she was not weak. She was humble, but she was not passive in the face of evil. She stood beneath the cross, where love did not look victorious to human eyes, and remained faithful when there was no immediate sign that suffering would end. Many people wish to become courageous without becoming tender, or tender without becoming courageous. Mary joins both. She teaches the heart to remain open without becoming naive, and to remain strong without becoming cruel. This was the spiritual atmosphere in which Maximilian's work began to grow. At first it was small, a few brothers, a few prayers, a few pages of printed material, a few people willing to offer themselves. There was no guarantee that the movement would succeed. There were no modern systems of communication to spread news instantly. There was only conviction, labor, and the patience required to begin. A vocation often looks unimpressive at the beginning. A person may feel called to care for the elderly, but at first there is only one neighbor who needs help. Someone may feel called to teach, but at first there is only one frightened student. Someone may desire to bring healing to a family, but at first there's only one difficult conversation. The first form of a calling is often smaller than the dream. That does not mean the dream is false. It means that God gives us a form we can carry. Maximilian returned to Poland after his studies. He returned with ideas, energy, and a deep desire to serve. But he also returned with physical weakness. His health was not always reliable, and illness would remain an important part of his story. This is easy to overlook when speaking about a person known for extraordinary activity. We may imagine that someone who accomplished so much must have possessed endless energy. We may forget that behind the work was a body that sometimes failed him, a body that required rest, treatment, and patience. Illness interrupts the illusion of control. It reminds a person that the body is not a machine that can be commanded indefinitely. It introduces dependence. It forces plans to be altered. It can make the future feel narrow. Maximilian's health difficulties did not make him less committed, but they required him to serve through limits. That is a different kind of courage from the courage of someone who feels strong. There is courage in the person who rises from bed with pain. There is courage in the person who accepts help after a lifetime of independence. There is courage in the person who keeps a gentle spirit while the body becomes unpredictable. Perhaps tonight your body is carrying what your mind cannot express. Perhaps your shoulders are tense because you have been trying to hold everything together. Perhaps your jaw is tight, your stomach unsettled, or your heart beating too quickly. You may be exhausted and still unable to rest. Saint Maximilian's life tells you that bodily weakness does not make you spiritually useless. You are not loved because you are efficient. You are not valuable because you can complete every task. You are not closer to God on the days when you achieve more. If all you can do tonight is lie still and ask for mercy, that prayer has dignity. If all you can manage is to endure another hour without giving in to despair, heaven sees the weight of that endurance. Maximilian would eventually help build a place that became known as IMMACULATE, the city of the Immaculate. The name expressed the desire to create a community devoted to Mary and dedicated to apostolic work. But before the place could become known, it had to be built. There was land to prepare and structures to raise. There were resources to find, tools to use, materials to carry, and decisions to make. The work was not romantic. It required mud, cold, tired muscles, delayed plans, and repeated effort. Imagine the early landscape. The ground beneath the workers' feet may have been wet and uneven. The air could be sharp in the morning. Wood carried the scent of forests. Metal tools struck against hard surfaces. Boards had to be measured, cut, lifted, and placed. Hands became rough. Clothing became marked by dust and weather. The friars prayed, but they also worked. This is part of the beauty of the Christian life. The sacred does not float above the material world. It enters wood, bread, ink, soil, sweat, and human schedules. A chapel must still be swept. A meal must still be prepared. A roof must still be repaired. A publication must still be printed. A sick brother must still be cared for. The kingdom of God is often built through ordinary materials. When you look at your own life, you may see only unfinished construction. You may see relationships that are not yet healed, habits that are not yet transformed, prayers that do not yet feel answered, and plans that remain incomplete. Do not mistake unfinishedness for failure. The city of the Immaculate was built piece by piece. Its growth required patience. The people involved could not see its final form every morning. They had to trust that the work of the present day belonged to a larger purpose. You may be living in the middle of your own construction. You may be carrying beams you do not yet know how to place. You may be clearing ground for a future you cannot imagine. You may be doing the hidden work of becoming trustworthy, patient, sober, compassionate, and free. The work may feel slow because deep work is slow. A soul is not repaired by command. It is healed through repeated contact with truth and mercy. At Niepokalanów, the life of the community took shape through a rhythm of prayer and action. There were times of silence and times of noise. There were moments in the chapel and moments among machines. There were shared meals, conversations, instructions, corrections, and the simple physical presence of brothers living near one another. The community became a place where ideals had to be tested. It is one thing to say that one belongs entirely to Mary. It is another to accept inconvenience without complaint. It is one thing to speak about charity. It is another to forgive a brother who has caused frustration. It is one thing to desire holiness. It is another to remain faithful when no one offers praise. The true measure of devotion is not the intensity of religious language. It is the shape of a person's patience. Maximilian's work would never have been possible without people. A printing operation required many hands. A religious community required cooperation. A missionary effort required trust. A publication could be imagined by one person, but it could not be completed by one person. This can be consoling for those who have been taught to carry everything alone. God's work does not require you to become self-sufficient. It often requires you to receive the help of others and to allow others to receive help through you. The church is not meant to be a collection of isolated spiritual heroes. It is meant to be a people. Perhaps you have been disappointed by community. Perhaps people have failed you. Perhaps you have tried to belong and have been excluded. Perhaps you have been hurt by religious people and no longer know whether you can trust the language of fellowship. Your wounds are real. Maximilian's example does not ask you to deny them. It invites you to believe that human failure does not exhaust the meaning of community. There can still be people who pray with you, people who protect your dignity, people who listen without demanding that you perform. Even if you do not yet know where those people are, the longing for such community is not foolish. It is a sign that you were made for communion. The printing apostolate became one of the central expressions of Maximilian's mission. He understood the power of words. A printed page could travel into a home, a workplace, a hospital, or a prison. It could be read by someone who had never met the people who created it. The machinery was practical and demanding. Paper had to be handled carefully. Ink could stain fingers and clothing. Metal type had to be arranged correctly. A single mistake could affect an entire page. Deadlines pressed upon the workers. Noise filled the rooms. The smell of ink lingered in the air. There is something almost sacramental about such work. A thought becomes a sentence becomes a page crosses distance. Someone reads it in private. The words enter the mind and perhaps remain there through a difficult night. Maximilian believed that communication could be used for evangelization. He did not want the church to retreat from new tools. If people were being reached through newspapers and journals, then the gospel could also travel through those means. His willingness to use modern communication revealed a particular kind of courage. He did not confuse holiness with fear of change. He understood that the tools themselves were not good or evil in isolation. Their meaning depended upon the spirit in which they were used. A machine could spread hatred, or it could carry hope. A page could manipulate, or it could illuminate. A voice could dominate, or it could comfort. This question remains close to your own life. Every day words enter your mind through screens, messages, headlines, advertisements, and conversations. Some words make you feel restless. Some awaken envy. Some deepen fear. Others remind you that you are not alone. Perhaps part of your difficulty sleeping comes from carrying too many voices into the night. You may have read one more article, watched one more frightening video, or entered one more argument before turning off the light. The mind continues processing what it has received. It keeps returning to images and sentences, as if vigilance could prevent harm. Maximilian's work with the printed word invites a gentle examination. What are you allowing to shape the interior atmosphere of your heart? You do not have to reject the world. You do not have to be unaware of reality. But you may choose what accompanies you into the final hour before sleep. A psalm can accompany you. A quiet story can accompany you. A simple prayer can accompany you. The name of Jesus can accompany you. You are allowed to close the door to some voices. You are allowed to stop receiving information for the night. You are allowed to let the world continue turning without your supervision. For Maximilian, the mission of communication was inseparable from prayer. He did not believe that a publication alone could transform a person. The printed word had to be placed in the service of grace. Human effort could prepare the ground, but conversion belonged to God. This guarded him from believing that success was entirely his responsibility. A person may work faithfully and still not see the desired result. A parent may teach and pray while a child chooses another path. A spouse may speak honestly and still not be understood. A minister may serve for years and see little visible fruit. A person may spend a lifetime trying to heal and remain aware of wounds that have not completely closed. If your life contains such disappointments, you are not necessarily doing something wrong. Seeds are not failures because they do not become trees overnight. The work of grace often happens beneath the surface, where we cannot measure it. Maximilian's approach to mission also depended upon a belief in the dignity of every person. He did not see people merely as audiences, numbers, or potential members. Each person was a soul. Each person carried an irreducible value because each person was created by God. That belief can become a form of healing for anyone who has been reduced to a role. Perhaps you have felt valued only for what you provide. Perhaps your family knows what you do, but not what you feel. Perhaps your workplace sees your labor, but not your exhaustion. Perhaps people approach you when they need something and disappear when you need care. You are more than your function. You are more than your role. 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 You are more than the responsibilities attached to your name. You are more than the mistakes others remember. You are more than the symptoms in your medical file. You are more than the fears that visit you at night. Maximilian's spirituality began with the conviction that the human person must be offered to God, not consumed by the demands of the world. This is why consecration can be so protective. To consecrate oneself is to say, I do not belong entirely to the opinions of others. I do not belong entirely to my failures. I do not belong entirely to my fears. I belong first to God. Such belonging does not remove earthly responsibilities. It gives them their proper place. You may still have bills, duties, illness, and difficult relationships, but they do not own the deepest part of you. Your employer does not own your soul. Your past does not own your soul. Your anxiety does not own your soul. The person who rejected you does not own your soul. The darkness does not own your soul. You belong to God. Maximilian's devotion to the Immaculate was a way of placing his entire life under Mary's guidance. He wanted his mind, his hands, his speech, and his work to become instruments of Christ. This was not a private sentiment. It shaped practical decisions. The city of the Immaculate had to be organized in a way that made service possible. The community had to balance prayer and work. The publications had to be accurate and accessible. The mission had to reach people who were spiritually distant. His Marian devotion became active. Mary is often called the mother of quietness, but her quietness was not inactivity. She traveled while pregnant. She gave birth under difficult conditions. She fled danger. She searched for her child. She stood beneath the cross. She remained with the disciples after the resurrection and in the early life of the Church. Her silence carried strength. For someone awake at night, Mary's quiet strength can feel like a shelter. She does not demand a performance. She does not ask you to explain every fear before she comes near. She does not become impatient because your heart is slow to trust. She remains. There are moments when remaining is the greatest act of love available. A mother remains beside a sick child. A friend remains through grief. A person remains beside a dying loved one. A believer remains in prayer even when consolation has disappeared. Mary remained beneath the cross. Maximilian learned from that remaining. As the years passed, the work at Nepokalanoff expanded. More people became connected to the community. More publications were produced. More tasks were added. The place began to embody the vision that had once existed only in the minds and prayers of a few friars. Growth can bring its own temptations. When work becomes successful, people may begin to identify success with divine approval. They may become attached to numbers, influence, recognition, and control. They may forget that the purpose of an apostolate is not to make its leaders important, but to make Christ known. Maximilian's deepest concern remained spiritual. He wanted the movement to be an instrument, not an idol. This distinction can help you examine your own life without condemnation. What are you trying to accomplish because it truly serves love? And what are you pursuing because you fear being unseen? What responsibilities are yours? And which ones have you accepted because you believe you must earn your right to exist? You do not need to answer these questions tonight. You may simply place them before God. Sometimes the soul cannot make good decisions while exhausted. Sometimes the first step toward wisdom is sleep. Sometimes the holiest thing you can do is stop trying to solve your whole life at midnight. Maximilian's example does not glorify frantic effort. It reveals the importance of a centered life. Prayer gives action a source. Rest gives work a boundary. Community gives mission a human face. Mary gives the heart a direction toward Christ. As the political situation in Europe worsened, the work of the friars entered a more dangerous environment. The world around them was becoming less tolerant of independent religious activity. The authorities wanted control over information, communities, and public thought. A printing apostolate dedicated to religious truth could not remain invisible forever. Fear began to touch ordinary decisions. What could be printed? What could be said? Who could be trusted? What would happen to the brothers? Would the community survive? Would the buildings be confiscated? Would people be arrested? These questions are not abstract when danger comes close. They enter kitchens. They interrupt sleep. They change the way people speak to one another. They cause families to hold their children more tightly. They make the sound of footsteps outside a door feel significant. Maximilian and the friars were not protected from the emotional impact of these changes. Their faith did not make them incapable of fear. It gave them a way to carry fear without surrendering the soul to it. This is a crucial distinction. Faith is not the absence of alarm. Faith is the refusal to let alarm become the only voice. When you are anxious, your mind may tell you that fear is the most honest response. It may say that hope is naive, that trust is dangerous, and that you must remain tense in order to remain prepared. But tension is not the same as readiness. A person can be aware without being consumed. A person can act wisely without imagining every disaster. A person can take precautions and still release the outcome to God. Maximilian lived in a time when many people had real reasons to be afraid. He did not tell them that danger was imaginary. He helped them remember that danger was not divine. No government, ideology, or violent force could become God. No human power could claim the deepest loyalty of the soul. This truth would later become very costly, but it was already present in his spiritual life. He had given himself to Christ through Mary. His identity was not available for purchase by the world. Perhaps you have allowed fear to negotiate with your identity. Perhaps you have said, "I am only safe if everyone approves of me," or "I am only worthy if I succeed," or "I am only loved if I never need help." These beliefs can become authorities inside the mind. They can command your attention long after the external situation has passed. Saint Maximilian's life speaks a different word. The final authority over you is not fear. The final authority over you is not shame. The final authority over you is not the voice that once rejected you. The final authority is the love of God revealed in Christ. As the community prepared for an uncertain future, Maximilian continued to see the person in front of him. This is one of the greatest protections against despair. Large events can become overwhelming when we think of them only in their totality. But love often becomes possible again when we return to the person immediately before us. One brother needed encouragement. Another needed instruction. A family needed a letter. A reader needed a word of truth. A person needed to be treated with dignity. The world could not be repaired in one day, but one person could be served today. This is also a path for you. When your worries become too large, return to what is near. Feel the surface beneath your body. Notice the blanket. Listen to the room. Entrust the people you love to God one by one, rather than attempting to carry the fate of everyone at once. You may not be able to hold the whole world. You were never asked to. You are asked to love within the circle God has placed around you and to entrust the rest to Him. Maximilian's apostolic vision was expansive, but his love remained concrete. He did not love an abstract humanity while neglecting individual people. His interest in technology and communication was not driven by novelty. He wanted real people to encounter real hope. This can also be seen in his concern for the written word. Every issue of a publication represented an opportunity to speak to someone who might never enter a friary. The reader could be a worker returning home, a mother caring for children, a student questioning the faith, or a lonely person searching for a reason to continue. The page could enter a place where the friar could not. In a similar way, the story you are hearing may enter a place where a friend cannot reach you tonight. It may sit beside you in the hours when the rest of the house is asleep. It cannot replace human companionship, medical care, or the support of people who know your life. But it can remind you of a larger communion. You are listening with people you will never meet. Some are awake in hospital rooms. Some are grieving. Some are far from home. Some are afraid of tomorrow. Some are caring for children. Some are struggling with memories. Some are simply tired. The saints accompany this hidden community of restless hearts. Maximilian, who used the tools available in his time to reach people, now reaches you through a voice carried into the night. The means are different, but the longing is similar, that no one should believe they are completely forgotten. There may have been moments when Maximilian felt his work was too large for his strength. He had to depend upon providence. He had to trust people. He had to accept delays. He had to learn that no apostolate moves forward through one person's will alone. The same lesson comes to every serious servant. You are not the savior of your family. You are not the savior of your community. You are not the savior of the person whose life worries you. Christ is the savior. This does not make your love unnecessary. It makes your love possible without the burden of pretending to be God. Perhaps you are exhausted because you have been trying to rescue someone who refuses help. Perhaps you believe that if you remain vigilant enough, you can prevent another person from making harmful choices. Perhaps you have taken responsibility for emotions that do not belong to you. Tonight, you may set some of that burden down. You can love without controlling. You can pray without monitoring. You can care without carrying another person's entire destiny. Maximilian's life was a life of responsibility, but not a life of ultimate control. He worked intensely, yet he knew that grace could not be manufactured. He organized communities, yet he knew that hearts could not be forced. He communicated truth, yet he knew that each person must freely receive it. Freedom is part of love. This understanding would later become central to his final witness. He would not be known only as a man who worked efficiently or built institutions. He would be remembered as a person whose love remained free under pressure. But that final freedom was prepared here, in the earlier chapters of his life. It was prepared when he chose discipline over impulse. It was prepared when he accepted weakness. It was prepared when he crossed borders. It was prepared when he continued to believe in the dignity of people who were confused or hostile. It was prepared whenever he refused to let difficulty make him indifferent. The red crown is visible at the end of the story, but the white crown is formed through daily surrender. Your own life may also be preparing you in ways you cannot yet see. The patience you are learning may one day become a shelter for someone else. The grief you are carrying may make you more compassionate. The weakness you resent may teach you how to receive. The uncertainty you fear may loosen your need for control. The nights when you cannot sleep may become occasions when you discover a deeper kind of prayer. This does not mean that suffering is sent so that you can become useful to others. It does not mean you should be grateful for every wound or refuse help. Pain is painful. Injustice is wrong. Illness deserves care. Loneliness deserves companionship. But even what you did not choose can be gathered into redemption. God can bring life from places you would never have chosen to enter. As the years of Maximilian's work continued, the world drew nearer to war. The light of his apostolate stood in contrast to the darkness gathering around Europe. The printing press continued to operate. The brothers continued to pray. And the city of the Immaculate continued to exist as a witness that human life could be organized around God, rather than fear. A community can become a prophecy. It can show that people need not live according to the logic of domination. They can share resources. They can pray together. They can work without making profit the highest good. They can use knowledge for service. They can protect the weak. Nepokalanow was not heaven. It had human limitations and difficulties, but it pointed toward another way of living. The same can happen in a small household. A family may not be perfect, but it can choose to speak without contempt. A room may be modest, but it can become a place of prayer. A friendship may have wounds, but it can begin again through one honest conversation. A person may be anxious, but they can choose not to pass their fear into every relationship. A night may be restless, but it can still become a sanctuary. The sacred is not always recognized by appearance. Sometimes it is recognized by the direction of love. Maximilian wanted his entire life to point toward the Immaculate Heart, toward the humble openness of Mary, and beyond Mary toward Christ. This was not an escape from history. It was a way of entering history without being possessed by it. When he looked at the troubled world, he did not say, "There is nothing to be done." He also did not say, "Everything depends on me." He said in effect, "I will offer what I can, and I will trust God with what I cannot." That is a prayer you may borrow tonight. Lord, I offer what I can. Lord, I trust you with what I cannot. Let the first sentence gather your responsibility. Let the second release your burden. You may offer your concern for a loved one. You may offer your fear about your health. You may offer your sadness over what has been lost. You may offer your hope for tomorrow. You may offer the very fact that you are still awake, and then you may entrust the rest. The world will still be there in the morning, with its unanswered questions and unfinished problems. But you do not have to meet it tonight. Tonight, the task is smaller. Tonight, you are allowed to be a person before you are a problem solver. You are allowed to be held before you are required to act. You are allowed to rest before you know how everything will be resolved. Saint Maximilian Kolbe's work in the city of the Immaculate was not a retreat from suffering. It was a preparation for meeting suffering without surrendering love. He built a place where prayer could continue, where truth could be shared, where brothers could support one another, and where people beyond the walls could be reminded of Christ. The structures he helped create would not prevent the coming violence. They would not make war impossible. They would not protect every person from arrest or imprisonment. But they formed hearts. And when circumstances stripped away buildings, machines, publications, and familiar routines, what had been formed within the heart remained. This is why the interior life matters. Everything external can change. Health can change. Finances can change. Relationships can change. Public reputation can change. A home can be lost. A career can end. A body can grow weak. A plan can collapse. But the deepest work of grace is not destroyed so easily. Every time you choose truth, something in you becomes clearer. Every time you choose mercy, something in you becomes freer. Every time you surrender control, something in you becomes less afraid. Every time you return to prayer, even after many failures, something in you remains turned toward God. You may not feel this formation happening. Neither did the boy Raymond understand what his first yes would eventually become. But the work was taking place, slowly, quietly, through years, through ordinary days, through the white crown before the red. And now, as the world around Maximilian became more dangerous, the life he had built was preparing to enter a new and far darker chapter. The presses, the buildings, the community, the roads, and the familiar sounds of daily work would soon be interrupted by the machinery of war. Yet before the darkness closed around him, he had learned something that no prison could easily remove. He had learned where he belonged. He belonged to Christ. He belonged to the Immaculate. He belonged, through love, to the people placed before him. And because he knew where he belonged, he did not need the world to confirm his identity. Perhaps this is the word your heart needs tonight. You may have lost something that once told you who you were. Perhaps your work ended. Perhaps someone left. Perhaps your health changed. Perhaps the role you built your life around is no longer possible. Perhaps you are alone in a room that once held another person. When familiar identities disappear, the soul can feel exposed. But beneath every role is a deeper belonging. You are not only a spouse, parent, child, worker, caregiver, patient, friend, or survivor. You are a beloved creature of God. Before you were useful, you were loved. Before you were successful, you were loved. Before you understood your purpose, you were loved. And when you are too tired to do anything at all, you remain loved. Maximilian's life would soon prove the strength of that belonging. But tonight, we remain for a while in the earlier years, in the workshops and chapels, in the rough land becoming a community, in the printed pages moving toward unknown readers, and in the heart of a friar who continued to say yes. Let the image remain with you, a quiet place, a few lamps burning, the smell of ink and wood, brothers moving through the corridors, a chapel waiting in the early hours, a rosary passing through worn fingers, Outside, the world is becoming uncertain. Inside, a man kneels. He does not know the shape of tomorrow. He knows only that God is worthy of trust. You may not be able to kneel tonight. You may be lying beneath a blanket, turning from one side to the other. That is all right. The body has its own needs. You do not have to imitate the saint's posture. You may offer your rest exactly as it is. Your prayer can be horizontal. Your prayer can be wordless. Your prayer can be a tired awareness that God is near. And if your awareness disappears and sleep comes, let that also be received as grace. The Lord who accompanied Maximilian through study, illness, work, travel, and uncertainty is not absent from your room. He is near to the restless. He is near to the exhausted. He is near to those who have forgotten how to hope. He is near to the person whose faith feels like a small ember, almost invisible beneath the ashes. An ember is enough for God to kindle. You do not have to create a great flame tonight. Protect the small light. Let the name of Jesus rest upon it. Let Mary draw near. Let Saint Maximilian remind you that a life can be transformed through many small acts of surrender, even when the meaning is hidden at the time. The city of the Immaculate was built with timber, paper, ink, prayer, and human hands. Your healing may also be built with simple materials: a glass of water, a doctor's appointment, a conversation with someone trustworthy, a boundary, a confession, a psalm, a morning walk, a decision to stop punishing yourself, a night of imperfect rest. Do not despise small beginnings. The saints did not despise them. They knew that love is often made visible through ordinary things. And as Maximilian continued forward, carrying the memory of the 2 crowns and the name of Mary, the work of his life became a quiet answer to a world increasingly tempted by violence. He did not yet know that one day he would be asked to prove, in the most terrible circumstances, whether love was stronger than fear. But the answer was already being formed in him. It was being formed in every prayer he offered, every brother he served, every page he helped create, every weakness he accepted, and every person whose dignity he refused to forget. The future was approaching. The darkness was approaching. But so was the witness of charity. The prisoner who kept his heart free. The darkness that was approaching Europe did not arrive all at once. For many people, it came through changes that seemed temporary at first: a public announcement, a new restriction, a warning spoken in a lowered voice, a neighbor who stopped appearing, a familiar sign removed from a shop, a newspaper that suddenly became less truthful, a question that could no longer be asked safely. Fear often enters history through ordinary doors. It enters through the home, the office, the school, the street, and the conversation between 2 people who are trying to decide what they can say. It settles over familiar places until the familiar becomes uncertain. It teaches people to listen for footsteps, to watch faces, and to wonder who may be observing them. For the friars of Nepokalanoff, the world was changing around the community they had built. The printing presses, the chapel, the workshops, the dormitories, and the fields remained physically present, but they were no longer sheltered from the forces moving through Poland. War does not begin only when armies meet. It begins when the dignity of human beings is denied. It begins when truth is made subordinate to power. It begins when people are divided into categories of worth, when some are declared valuable and others disposable, when fear is turned into a tool of obedience. Maximilian had spent years speaking about the dignity of the human person. Now the world was becoming a place where that dignity was under direct assault. He and the friars could not stop the armies. They could not control the decisions of governments. They could not guarantee the safety of their community. What they could do was remain faithful to the life they had received. They continued to pray. They continued to serve. They continued, as far as circumstances allowed, to care for people who came to them. This kind of courage can seem almost too quiet to notice. There is no dramatic movement in it, no declaration that changes the course of history. There is only the decision not to let fear erase charity. Perhaps you know something about that decision. You may not be living through a war, but you may be living through a private crisis that has changed the atmosphere of your home. A diagnosis may have made every day feel uncertain. A family conflict may have turned ordinary conversations into occasions of tension. A financial burden may have made the future appear narrow. The loss of someone you love may have left familiar rooms feeling foreign. When life changes, it is difficult to continue ordinary acts with an ordinary heart. You may still prepare meals, answer questions, go to work, care for others, and complete necessary tasks. But everything feels altered beneath the surface. The world continues, yet you do not feel like the same person moving through it. The friars at IMMACULATE knew something of this altered reality. Their work continued, but the meaning of every action was touched by danger. A page was not simply a page. A gathering was not simply a gathering. A journey was not simply a journey. The presence of authority became heavier. The possibility of arrest became real. Maximilian did not pretend that fear was absent. He did not need to create the appearance of invulnerability. His strength came from a deeper place than public confidence. He knew that Christ had entered human suffering. That knowledge did not answer every question. It did not guarantee that the community would be protected from violence, but it prevented suffering from becoming proof that God had abandoned the world. This is one of the hardest truths for a person to hold. When something terrible happens, the heart may ask, "Where was God?" The question is not a sign of faithlessness. It can be the cry of a wounded faith seeking the face of God within pain. Perhaps you have asked this question. Perhaps you asked it beside a hospital bed, at a funeral, after a betrayal, or during a night when your mind returned again and again to something you could not change. Perhaps you prayed for protection and saw no protection. Perhaps you prayed for healing and received a longer illness. Perhaps you prayed for the return of someone you loved, and the silence continued. Saint Maximilian's life does not offer a simple explanation for why suffering is permitted. It offers companionship within the question. He shows us a faith that did not depend upon an easy world. He believed in God while living in a world where human beings were being imprisoned, displaced, tortured, and killed. His belief was not a denial of evil. It was a refusal to grant evil the final word about reality. There is evil. There is injustice. There is cruelty. There is loss that cannot be made beautiful by a sentence. And yet, there is also love that can remain present within the darkness. When German forces entered Poland, the life of the country was changed by occupation. Religious communities were watched. Priests and intellectuals were targeted. Public speech was controlled. Families were separated. The machinery of persecution began to organize itself. Maximilian and the friars faced arrest more than once. In the first period of detention, he and his companions were taken away from the community. They were transported, questioned, confined, and eventually released. The return may have brought relief, but it could not restore the world to what it had been. A person who has been arrested does not simply forget the experience after the door opens. The body remembers, the mind remembers the uncertainty, the sound of commands, the loss of control, the feeling of being moved from one place to another without explanation, the awareness that one's safety depends upon decisions made by people who may not recognize one's humanity. For many people, trauma begins a second life after the event. The danger may end, but the nervous system continues to expect it. A sound in the hallway, a knock at the door, a sudden change in someone's voice, or a nighttime awakening can bring the past into the present. If you carry something like this, be patient with yourself. Your body may be trying to protect you from a danger that has already passed. The vigilance may be exhausting, but it is not a moral failure. Healing often requires time, support, and the compassionate care of people who understand what fear does to the body. Maximilian's story is not a replacement for that care. It is not a command to overcome trauma through willpower. It is a witness that even when the body has been frightened, the soul can slowly learn again that it is more than what happened to it. After his release, he returned to Nepokalanov and continued serving the community. But the threat had not disappeared. The war deepened. The occupation became more oppressive. The space for religious work narrowed. There were shortages. There was uncertainty about food and supplies. There were increasing reasons to be cautious. Families came seeking help, and the friars had to determine how best to respond. In such circumstances, charity becomes practical. It may look like sharing food. It may look like offering shelter. It may look like writing a letter. It may look like helping someone cross a dangerous border or protecting a person from being exposed. It may look like preserving a record of truth when authorities want history to be rewritten. It may look like remaining silent at the right moment and speaking at the right moment. The love of Christ does not always resemble the images found in prayer books. Sometimes it looks like a person making a careful decision under pressure, trying to protect someone more vulnerable than themselves. Maximilian was a priest, but his priesthood was not confined to formal religious setting. A priest may serve through the sacraments, preaching, counsel, and prayer, but priesthood also becomes visible through presence. To remain beside the suffering is itself a ministry. When the time came for Maximilian to be arrested again, the community faced a new level of danger. The friary could no longer function as it had. The brothers were exposed. The structures that had carried their mission were being dismantled by forces beyond their control. This can be one of the most painful experiences in life. To see something built with love become vulnerable. Perhaps you have invested years in a marriage, a family, a business, a vocation, or a friendship. You may have tried to create a place of safety. You may have worked patiently, made sacrifices, and believed that the structure would endure. Then circumstances changed. Illness entered. Someone betrayed trust. A job disappeared. A child made a dangerous choice. A loved one died. A community divided. The place you had built no longer felt secure. Maximilian's life reminds you that the value of what you built is not erased when it is damaged. The work may not continue in the form you imagined, but the love given during its construction remains real. The city of the Immaculate could be threatened, yet the prayers offered there were not wasted. The pages printed there could be destroyed, yet the truth they carried had already entered human hearts. The relationships formed there could be interrupted, yet they had changed the people who lived them. Nothing offered in love disappears completely. The second arrest was more severe. Maximilian was taken away and eventually sent to Auschwitz, a concentration camp created by the Nazi regime. The name itself has become inseparable from the memory of genocide, dehumanization, forced labor, starvation, and systematic murder. To speak of Auschwitz requires reverence. It was not merely a prison. It was not simply a place where people were detained during wartime. It was a system designed to crush the human person, to remove identity, to exploit the body, and to make death appear ordinary. People arrived carrying names, memories, families, professions, prayers, and hopes. The system sought to reduce them to numbers. The reduction of a person to a number is not a minor administrative act. It is an assault on the truth of who that person is. A name says, you are not interchangeable. A name carries a history. A name belongs to a mother who once spoke it, a friend who remembers it, a child who called for it, and a God who knows it completely. The camp tried to make names disappear. Maximilian continued to see persons. This was one of his forms of resistance. He could not dismantle the fences. He could not release every prisoner. He could not stop the guards from inflicting cruelty. But he could refuse to accept the lie that anyone before him was less than human. That refusal is more important than it may first appear. When the world tells you that you are a burden, dignity says otherwise. When shame tells you that you are only your worst mistake, dignity says otherwise. When illness tells you that you are no longer useful, dignity says otherwise. When loneliness tells you that no one would notice if you disappeared, dignity says otherwise. You have a name. You are known. You are not disposable. At Auschwitz, Maximilian was stripped of the ordinary signs of his priesthood. He did not have the freedom to move through a parish, the security of a church, the privacy of a confessional, or the resources of a religious community. But priesthood could not be reduced to clothing or buildings. He remained a priest through the way he treated people. He remained a priest through prayer. He remained a priest through the courage to speak hope. He remained a priest through the willingness to share the suffering of those around him. The camp was designed to isolate people from one another. Hunger turned prisoners inward. Fear made trust dangerous. Exhaustion weakened the ability to care. Violence taught people to expect cruelty. Yet small signs of solidarity continued. A piece of bread shared, a warning whispered, a hand offered to someone who had fallen, a person remembered by name, a prayer spoken under the breath. Such actions may have appeared insignificant beside the scale of the camp, but evil depends upon persuading people that goodness is useless. Every act of mercy contradicts that persuasion. Maximilian's ministry was often hidden. He could not deliver long sermons to a congregation seated in safety. He could not offer polished explanations. He had to work with fragments: a look, a sentence, a prayer, a gesture, a presence. Sometimes a person who is suffering does not need an explanation. They need to know that someone has not turned away. Perhaps this is what your heart needs tonight. Not an answer that makes everything understandable. Not an instruction to be grateful for pain. Not a reminder that others have suffered more. Perhaps you need the simple assurance that someone is willing to remain near you while the question is still unanswered. Saint Maximilian remained near others. He did not need to eliminate their fear before he could accompany them. He did not require them to become spiritually impressive. He stood among people whose bodies were exhausted and whose futures had been stolen. He treated them as persons. The conditions of camp life were brutal. Prisoners faced hunger, exposure, forced labor, disease, beatings, humiliation, and constant uncertainty. The body was pushed beyond its limits. Sleep was inadequate. Food was insufficient. Privacy was removed. The ordinary boundaries that protect human dignity were deliberately destroyed. It is important not to romanticize this suffering. The camp was evil. The victims were not there because they needed a spiritual lesson. They were not responsible for what was inflicted upon them. Their suffering was not made acceptable by the later recognition of a saint. Christian reflection must never become a way of excusing injustice. To say that grace can be present in a place of horror is not to say that the horror was good. It is to say that evil cannot fully control what God can bring forth from the human heart. Maximilian's charity did not make the camp just. It made the injustice visible by revealing that the prisoners possessed a dignity the camp could not destroy. He could still choose love. The guards could control his movement, his food, his labor, and his physical circumstances. They could impose punishment. They could limit speech. But they could not fully command the interior act by which he refused to become cruel. This does not mean he was never afraid, angry, or physically overwhelmed. It means that fear and pain were not allowed to define his final response. For you, this distinction may be important. You may believe that because you feel anxious, you have failed to trust God. You may believe that because you are angry, you are no longer capable of love. You may believe that because you are exhausted, you are spiritually weak. But emotions are not the same as decisions. Fear can be present while courage is being practiced. Grief can be present while love remains. Anger can be present while you choose not to harm. Exhaustion can be present while you continue to receive God's care. The body and the soul do not always move at the same speed. Your heart may desire peace while your nervous system remains alert. Your mind may believe that you are safe while your body still trembles. Be patient with the distance between what you know and what you feel. Maximilian's life does not suggest that faith erases the body's response to danger. It suggests that the human person is more than the body's alarm. In the camp, he joined people who had been denied ordinary ways of mourning. Families had been separated. Many did not know whether their loved ones were alive. Memories became painful because they could not be confirmed by contact. Maximilian knew something about separation from his own life as a friar. He had left his family years earlier, but the separation of religious vocation was not the same as the forced separation created by persecution. The camp brought a more terrible kind of loss, one in which people could be removed without explanation and remembrance could become the only remaining form of connection. A person who is grieving may live in a world that others cannot see. They may carry the voice of someone who is gone, the shape of a hand, the memory of a room, or a sentence that was never completed. Other people may expect them to return to ordinary life, but grief changes the meaning of ordinary things. A chair is no longer only a chair. A song is no longer only a song. A date on the calendar can become a place of pain. A night can become a time when memories rise without warning. If you are grieving, you do not need to rush yourself toward closure. Love does not end simply because a person has died. The form of the relationship changes, but the heart may continue to speak to the one who is absent. Saint Maximilian's presence among prisoners included a respect for their memories. Their families were not irrelevant. Their former lives were not erased because the camp had taken their freedom. They remained sons, daughters, husbands, wives, fathers, mothers, friends, and beloved children of God. The camp tried to define them by their suffering. Maximilian's charity remembered more. The daily life of the prisoners was marked by commands. They were ordered to move, work, stand, wait, and submit. The constant command of others can gradually invade the mind. A person begins to feel that they have no interior space left, no ability to choose, no right to desire. This is one of the ways oppression works. It teaches the victim to experience themselves only through the eyes of the oppressor. Maximilian's spiritual presence offered another way of seeing. Even if a person had no control over the next hour, they were not only an object of someone else's command. They were still a soul capable of prayer, memory, compassion, and hope. This has meaning for anyone who feels controlled by circumstances. Perhaps your life has become organized around another person's moods. Perhaps you are constantly monitoring a family member, trying to prevent conflict. Perhaps debt, illness, or work has narrowed your choices. Perhaps you feel that every decision is already made by forces beyond you. You may not be able to change everything immediately, but there may remain a small interior freedom. You can tell the truth to God. You can choose the next right action. You can seek help. You can refuse to believe every accusation made by fear. You can protect the small space in which your conscience still speaks. No one can take that space without your surrender. And if the space feels very small tonight, do not despise it. A small room can still contain a prayer. A single candle can still illuminate a face. One word can still become an act of trust. The prisoners were forced to confront the fragility of the body. Hunger made time feel physical. Cold entered the bones. Work demanded energy that food could not restore. Illness moved quickly through crowded spaces. Maximilian had known bodily weakness before Auschwitz. Now weakness was intensified by deliberate cruelty. He could not control whether he became ill. He could not guarantee how long he would survive. He could not protect himself through ordinary means. This vulnerability could have become a source of despair. Instead, it became a place where his dependence upon God and upon the solidarity of others was revealed. The Christian faith does not teach that the body is worthless. It teaches that the body is precious and vulnerable, and that the human person must never be treated as a tool. A body that is tired is not a failed body. A body that is ill is not a cursed body. A body that carries scars is not a shameful body. A body that cannot sleep is not an enemy. Your body may be asking for compassion tonight rather than criticism. It may not respond immediately to your desire for rest. It may require patience, professional care, medication, routine, or time. You do not have to turn against it because it is struggling. Maximilian's witness is not a demand to ignore physical needs. It is an invitation to see the body as a part of the person God loves. In the camp, prayer could not always be practiced, as it had been in the friary. There were no comfortable hours in a chapel, no carefully arranged altar, no quiet preparation, and no sense of safety. Yet prayer continued in fragments. Someone remembered a line from Scripture. Someone moved the lips without sound. Someone whispered the name of Mary. Someone placed a hand over the heart. Someone looked toward the sky. Prayer in such a place did not depend upon atmosphere. It depended upon relationship. The person praying was not creating God's presence. They were turning toward a presence already there. This is important when you cannot pray as you wish. You may be too tired to read. You may be too distracted to meditate. You may be too angry to speak warmly to God. You may not know what words are honest. You can turn toward God without feeling close to God. You can say, I am here. You can say, help me. You can say, remember me. You can say nothing and still remain open. The Lord does not measure prayer by its elegance. The cry of a frightened person is still prayer. The sigh of someone grieving is still prayer. The silence of someone who cannot continue speaking is still held by God. Saint Maximilian's ministry among prisoners included the sharing of whatever spiritual strength he possessed. He could not offer physical abundance, but he could offer presence. He could not change their circumstances, but he could refuse to abandon them emotionally. A person may be starving and still be encouraged by the knowledge that another human being sees them. A person may be condemned and still be dignified by a word spoken with respect. A person may be terrified and still discover that fear does not have to be endured alone. This is why companionship matters so much in the night. Insomnia is not merely a physical inconvenience. It can become a form of isolation. During the day, there are tasks, voices, vehicles, messages, and movement. At night, the mind may encounter itself without distraction. For some people, the bedroom becomes the place where all postponed emotions return. The grief arrives, the regret arrives, the fear of death arrives, the worry about money arrives, the memory of a cruel sentence arrives, the question of whether one is loved arrives. And because everyone else appears to be sleeping, the person may conclude that they are alone with all of it. If this is you, let the story of Maximilian offer a small correction. You are not the only one awake in the human family. Across time, people have kept watch through nights of illness, imprisonment, war, grief, and uncertainty. The saints are not distant ornaments. They are witnesses that the night can be entered without becoming the owner of the soul. Maximilian could not leave the camp, but he could become a place of refuge for those near him. Perhaps you cannot leave your circumstances tonight, but you may become a small place of refuge within your own heart. You may stop speaking to yourself with contempt. You may allow yourself to be tired without calling yourself weak. You may recognize that the frightened part of you is not an enemy, but a part in need of care. The presence of compassion changes the inner atmosphere, not instantly, but gradually. The selection of prisoners who would die by starvation came after an escape from the camp. The camp authorities responded to the escape by choosing men to be punished. The intention was to make an example, to create terror among all the prisoners, and to declare that one person's attempt at freedom would cost others their lives. Among those selected was Franciszek Gajowniczek, a Polish soldier and prisoner. When he understood that he was being condemned, he cried out for his wife and children. His cry was not abstract. It was the cry of a man who still belonged to a family in his heart. He was not only a prisoner, he was a husband, he was a father. He had people waiting, or perhaps people who would never know what had happened to him. The guards did not need to recognize the depth of his humanity for it to be real. God recognized it. The other prisoners recognized it. Maximilian recognized it. Then he stepped forward. He offered to take Gajowniczek's place. The moment has become one of the most remembered acts of Christian charity in the 20th century. But it should not be reduced to a polished image that hides the fear surrounding it. To step forward meant choosing a death that was slow, deliberate, and horrifying. It meant entering a cell with no expectation of rescue. It meant accepting that the body would be deprived of food and water until life ended. Maximilian was not choosing an abstract symbol. He was choosing a real man. He was choosing the future of a family he would never meet. He was choosing to place his own life between another prisoner and execution. The guard's system was built upon the assumption that people would protect themselves first. Maximilian's action contradicted that assumption. He did not claim that his life was worth more than Gajowniczek's. He did not declare himself superior. He simply offered himself. This is the heart of Christian charity. Not the belief that the self is worthless, but the freedom to give oneself for the life of another. The act was not born in that single instant. It had been prepared over years. A person does not suddenly become capable of total self-giving without a history of smaller offerings. Maximilian had practiced surrender in his vocation. He had learned to offer his time, health, intelligence, comfort, plans, and energy. He had lived beneath the sign of the two crowns. The final act revealed the shape of the earlier life. This may offer hope to you if you feel incapable of great courage. You do not need to wait for a dramatic moment. Your heart is being formed now. Every small decision matters. Every act of patience, every quiet sacrifice, every refusal to become cruel is shaping the person you are becoming. No one can know exactly where the road will lead. But love grows through practice. When Maximilian stepped forward, the condemned men were taken to the starvation bunker. The door closed behind them. The world narrowed to walls, darkness, and the slow passage of time. The place was designed to make death invisible to the outside world. It removed light, food, privacy, and hope. It was intended to reduce the prisoners to bodies waiting to stop. Yet Maximilian carried into that cell something the guards could not measure. He carried the freedom to love. The cell of starvation and the victory of charity. The door of the starvation bunker closed behind Maximilian and the men who had been condemned with him. Outside, the camp continued its brutal rhythm. Commands were shouted. Boots struck the ground. Prisoners were moved from one place to another. Work details continued. The machinery of the camp did not pause to recognize the significance of what had happened inside that room. But for the men in the cell, time changed. There was no longer the ordinary movement of a day, no work assignment to complete, no line to join, no task that could distract the mind from what was coming. The world narrowed to the walls around them, the bodies beside them, the hunger within them, and the uncertain passage of 1 hour into another. The cell was not a place built for prayer, it was built for punishment. It was meant to communicate that the condemned no longer belonged to ordinary human society. They were to be removed from the world and left to disappear. The authorities intended hunger to become an instrument of terror and death to become a warning for everyone who remained. But the meaning of a place is not determined only by the people who construct it. A prison may be built to humiliate, yet a prisoner may still pray within it. A hospital room may be filled with fear, yet a family may still speak tenderness there. A bedroom may be entered by anxiety, yet the presence of God can still be welcomed there. The starvation bunker was designed as a place of abandonment. Maximilian entered it as a priest. He did not bring a book. He did not bring a vestment. He did not bring the ordinary objects associated with the church. He brought only the interior life that had been formed through years of prayer, sacrifice, study, service, and trust. The first hours may have passed with shock. The men had been taken from the open space of the camp and placed in a confined room. Their bodies were already exhausted from hunger, labor, and fear. Their minds had to absorb the knowledge that they had been condemned and that no ordinary rescue was coming. In such a moment, words can become difficult. A person may not know what to say to someone whose death is approaching. Comfort can feel inadequate. Explanations can seem almost cruel. Even prayer may seem impossible, because every familiar phrase collides with the reality of the room. Maximilian did not need to offer a theory that made the situation acceptable. He could offer presence. He could remain. He could turn toward the men and communicate, through voice or silence, that they had not become invisible. This is a form of love that many people underestimate. When someone is suffering, we often feel pressure to say the perfect thing. We search for the right explanation, the right promise, the the right words to remove the pain. But sometimes the most merciful thing is not to explain. It is to accompany, to sit beside the person, to listen, to remember their name, to keep watch, to say, "I am here." Perhaps this is why the story of Maximilian reaches so many people who are lonely. His final ministry was not one of achievement. It was a ministry of remaining near people who could not be rescued by human power. He could not open the door. He could not bring food. He could not alter the camp authorities' decision, but he could refuse to let the men die as though no one loved them. The human person can endure much when they know they are not alone. This does not make suffering easy. It does not erase fear or physical pain, but companionship changes the meaning of a room. A hospital room is different when a loved one holds your hand. A funeral home is different when someone sits beside you. A prison is different when a person speaks your name. A sleepless bedroom is different when you remember that someone, somewhere, is praying for you. Maximilian's presence became a quiet shelter in the cell. The days that followed were marked by the decline of the human body. Hunger became more than an uncomfortable sensation. It became a force that weakened thought, movement, and speech. Thirst deepened. The body began to consume its own reserves. The men became increasingly fragile. It is important to speak of this with reverence. The saints are not less human because they suffer. Maximilian did not float above his body. He was not made of stone. He did not become incapable of distress. His courage did not mean that his physical being was untouched by starvation. Christian holiness does not mean refusing to acknowledge the body. The body is not an embarrassment to the soul. It is part of the person God created. It feels hunger, cold, pain, thirst, and exhaustion. It can tremble, it can weaken, it can cry out. There is no shame in having a body that needs care. There is no shame in being tired. There is no shame in needing medicine, assistance, food, water, sleep, or protection. Maximilian's final days do not teach us to despise these needs. They reveal the dignity of a person who continued to love even when his body was being deprived of what it required. If your body is struggling tonight, do not speak to it as if it were your enemy. Perhaps you are frustrated because you cannot sleep. Perhaps you have tried every method you know. Perhaps the harder you try to force rest, the more alert you become. Your body may feel like it is betraying you, but your body is not your enemy. It may be frightened. It may be overtired. It may be carrying tension from years of stress. It may need professional support. It may need patience rather than anger. Let the story of Maximilian remind you that your body remains worthy of compassion, even when it does not behave as you wish. Within the cell, prayer began to take a new form. The men could not attend Mass as they once had. They could not kneel comfortably. They could not follow a carefully ordered liturgical schedule. They could not rely upon external beauty to help them focus. But memory remained. A prayer learned in childhood can survive when everything else has been taken away. A line from Scripture can return after decades. The name of Mary can rise from the heart without preparation. The Our Father can be spoken by someone whose voice has become weak. Prayer is sometimes stored in us before we know we will need it. Perhaps you learned a prayer when you were young. Perhaps your mother or father taught you the Our Father. Perhaps a grandmother placed a rosary in your hand. Perhaps you have not prayed that prayer in years. But tonight, a word may return. Do not dismiss the prayers you once knew. They may be waiting for you. Maximilian's devotion to Mary would have been especially meaningful in that place. He had spent his life entrusting himself to the Immaculate. He had believed that Mary could lead souls to Christ even through the darkest circumstances. Now he was in a cell where human hope had been deliberately reduced. Yet the presence of Mary was not dependent upon the presence of a statue or a church. She was near through the faith held in the heart. She was near as the mother who had known danger, displacement, and grief. She was near as the woman who had stood at the foot of the cross without receiving an explanation that removed sorrow. She was near as the one who remained when remaining was all that could be done. Perhaps you have been waiting for God to remove something before you can believe that He is with you. You may be waiting for the diagnosis to change, the person to return, the debt to disappear, the grief to lessen, or the anxiety to stop. You may think that divine presence will become convincing only when circumstances improve. But Mary's presence beneath the cross says something else. Sometimes God is present before the situation changes. Sometimes the first grace is not deliverance from the cell, but companionship within it. This is not a denial of your desire to be free. It is not a suggestion that you should accept injustice or stop seeking help. It is a reminder that the absence of immediate relief is not proof of divine absence. Maximilian's companions may have spoken of their families. A man's thoughts can return to home even when home is unreachable. He may remember a wife's face, a child's voice, a village road, a room where he once slept, or a meal shared at a table. These memories can be both painful and precious. Memory has a double edge. It can wound because it reveals what has been lost. It can also preserve love because it keeps the beloved present in a different form. In the bunker, the men were not only prisoners awaiting death, they were people with histories. They had once lived ordinary days. They had known sunlight, work, arguments, laughter, and the changing seasons. The camp did not create their identities. It only attempted to conceal them. Maximilian's ministry helped reveal them again. To pray with a man is to say that his soul matters. To listen to his memories is to say that his past has not been erased. To stand beside him is to say that his final hours are not meaningless. There is a deep loneliness in believing that your life has become irrelevant. Many people experience this during illness, retirement, unemployment, grief, or old age. They may feel that society notices them only when they are productive. When productivity ends, they fear that love will end with it. But your life is not valuable because you can produce. The person you were before your illness is not more worthy than the person you are now. The person you were before your failure is not more loved than the person you are now. The person you were before your loss is not closer to God than the person who remains. Your dignity is not a reward given for performance. It is a gift rooted in creation and sustained by divine love. Maximilian's final ministry took place when he could no longer produce anything that the world would call useful. He could not build a community, print a newspaper, study a theological question, travel to a mission, or organize a project. He could still love. That was enough. The men in the cell gradually became weaker. Their voices may have grown quieter. Their bodies may have been unable to support the posture they would have preferred. The passage of time may have seemed both endless and strangely compressed. In the ordinary world, people measure time through clocks, meals, appointments, and work. In the bunker, time was measured through thirst, breathing, memory, and the presence or absence of another voice. This slow passage of time may speak to anyone who has spent a night watching the hours move. When you cannot sleep, minutes become visible. You notice the sound of a refrigerator, the changing color of the window, the movement of shadows, the temperature of the room. You may look at the clock and feel discouraged because only a few minutes have passed. The night can seem like a corridor with no end. If this is happening to you now, remember that you do not have to make the whole night peaceful at once. You do not have to conquer the next 6 hours. You only have to receive the present moment, this breath, this sentence, this small interval of rest. The body may remain awake, but the soul can still stop fighting. You can say, "For this moment, I am here." You can say, "For this moment, I am held." You can say, "For this moment, I do not have to solve tomorrow." Maximilian could not change the length of his final days. He could only inhabit them with love. He did not know exactly how long his body would continue. He did not know which of the men would die first. He did not know whether anyone outside the cell understood what was happening inside. But he could give the next moment to God. This is not a small spiritual practice. It is one of the ways a person becomes free. Fear wants to take the future in advance. It wants you to suffer tomorrow before tomorrow arrives. It wants to make you carry every possible outcome at once. Faith returns you to the present, not because the future is unimportant, but because the present is the place where grace can be received. The cell became a place of prayer and song. Accounts of Maximilian's final days describe a spiritual atmosphere in which prayers and hymns could be heard from the bunker. The men were not pretending that they were safe. They were not singing because death was pleasant. They were singing because the human heart can still turn toward God in the presence of death. Song can be an act of resistance. It declares that the voice has not been completely silenced. It declares that the person is more than the suffering imposed upon the body. It declares that there remains a beauty the camp cannot control. Perhaps you have experienced this in a smaller way. A hymn may return to you when you are sad. A melody may carry a memory of church, family, or childhood. A song may give shape to grief that words cannot contain. You do not have to sing aloud tonight. You may simply allow a remembered phrase to rest within you. Abide with me. Jesus, remember me. Hail Mary. Into your hands. The words may be imperfect. The voice in your mind may be weak. God does not require a concert. He receives the offering of a heart that turns toward Him. The camp authorities might have expected despair to dominate the bunker. Instead, Maximilian's presence helped create a different atmosphere. He did not deny death, but he refused to let death become the only reality. There was still relationship. There was still prayer. There was still concern for the others. There was still the possibility of blessing. This is what charity does. It creates a space in which the other person can remain human. To love someone is to protect their humanity from being reduced to a problem, a diagnosis, an inconvenience, or a number. Perhaps you have felt reduced by someone close to you. Perhaps you are treated as the anxious one, the difficult one, the sick one, the unreliable one, the one who always needs something, or the one who is expected to remain strong. Those labels may describe a struggle, but they do not describe the whole person. You are not your condition. You are not the worst day you have lived. You are not the moment when you lost control. You are not the story someone tells about you when they are angry. You are a person whose life contains mystery, dignity, and the possibility of grace. Maximilian looked beyond the label of prisoner. He saw the beloved person. During his final days, the bodily effects of starvation continued. The men who had been placed in the cell were dying one by one. The room became quieter. The number of voices diminished. Every death in such a place could have deepened despair. Yet the presence of one person willing to remain faithful could prevent the cell from becoming spiritually empty. Maximilian's charity was not measured by how many people he saved in the ordinary sense. He did not free the entire camp. He did not end the war. He did not prevent all the suffering around him. He gave himself for one man who had a wife, one man who had children, one life. The world often teaches us to think in terms of scale. We value what reaches millions. We measure impact through visibility. We admire the person who changes systems and forget the person who protects one vulnerable human being. But love is not made insignificant by being personal. A single life is not a small thing. One person is an entire world of memories, relationships, fears, hopes, and possibilities. To save one person is not to save only one. It is to protect a universe that God knows completely. This may matter if you feel that your own needs are too small to bring before God. Perhaps you think your anxiety is insignificant compared with the world's crises. Perhaps you are embarrassed by your grief because others have suffered different losses. Perhaps you believe you should not need comfort. But God does not love humanity in the abstract while ignoring you personally. The Lord sees the individual. He sees your room. He knows your name. He understands the fear you have not told anyone. He is not annoyed by your need for reassurance. The saint who gave his life for one prisoner shows that one person is always worth attention. As August 14th approached, the date carried a spiritual resonance for Maximilian. The feast of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary would come the following day, August 15th. Mary had been central to his life from childhood. The red crown he had once chosen now appeared at the end of a path shaped by the white crown of consecration. It would be easy to turn this into a neat story in which every detail was planned from the beginning. But human life is not experienced as neatly as that. Maximilian did not spend every day thinking, "This is how the story will end." He lived through ordinary time. He experienced setbacks, sickness, work, uncertainty, and fear. The meaning of his life became clearer only gradually. This is good news for you. You do not have to understand your life tonight. You do not need to know how your present suffering fits into a final narrative. You do not need to explain why one person was taken and another remained, why one prayer was answered and another seemed ignored, or why a particular burden has lasted so long. Some mysteries can only be entrusted. Mary did not receive an explanation for everything beneath the cross. Maximilian did not receive an explanation for the suffering of the prisoners around him. You may not receive an explanation for every sorrow, but you can still receive the presence of God. On August 14, 1941, Maximilian died in the starvation bunker after being given a lethal injection. He had survived longer than the other men, and the authorities wanted the cell cleared for further use. The facts are stark. A priest who had built communities, published words, served missions, and cared for people was reduced by the camp to a body that needed to be removed. The system saw an inconvenience. Christ saw a faithful son. The guards could determine the method of death. They could not determine the meaning of his life. They could end his physical existence. They could not erase the charity that had already been given. They could not undo the life of Franciscan Kolbe. They could not remove the testimony from those who survived. They could not prevent the story from reaching future generations. And they could not make love look foolish. Maximilian's death was not a victory for the camp, even though the camp ended his life. The camp had power over his body, but it did not possess his heart. This does not make the death less tragic. It makes the tragedy a place where the power of love becomes visible. Christian hope does not say that death is harmless. Death is an enemy. Separation wounds. The loss of a beloved person is real. But the resurrection of Christ declares that death does not have absolute authority. Maximilian died in the shadow of Christ's death and resurrection. His life was not saved from suffering in the way he might have wished. It was given through suffering into the hands of God. For those listening tonight who fear death, this can be a tender place of reflection. Fear of death often becomes louder at night. When the world is quiet, the mind may begin imagining illness, loss, and the end of life. You may become aware of the fragility of the body and feel terrified by what you cannot control. You do not have to force yourself to feel peaceful about death. You may bring the fear honestly to Christ. Jesus himself entered anguish. He did not respond to death with coldness. He wept. He prayed. He asked that the cup might pass, and then entrusted himself to the Father. Christian courage is not the absence of a trembling heart. It is the choice to place the trembling heart in God's hands. Maximilian did not become a saint because he possessed no fear. He became a witness because fear did not prevent him from loving. That distinction may relieve you. You can be afraid and still be faithful. You can be anxious and still be loved. You can be uncertain and still be guided. You can be weak and still become a source of comfort to someone else. The man whose place Maximilian took, Franciscan Kolbe, survived the camp. His life continued, carrying the memory of the priest who had stepped forward for him. Survival can be a complicated gift. A person who survives may feel gratitude, but also guilt. They may wonder why they lived when others died. They may carry the faces of those who did not return. They may feel that they must justify their continued existence by making every remaining day meaningful. Many people carry a form of survivor's guilt. Perhaps you survived an accident, an illness, a family tragedy, or a season in which someone else did not survive. Perhaps you are haunted by the thought that you should have done more. Perhaps you feel guilty for experiencing joy after loss. If this is part of your story, let mercy come near. You are not required to punish yourself in order to prove that you remember the dead. You do not betray those who died by continuing to live. You do not dishonor them by resting. You do not abandon them by laughing again. Love can carry memory without refusing life. Franciszek Gajowniczek lived with the knowledge that Maximilian had given his life for him. No human being can easily repay such a gift. The proper response to such love is not perpetual self-hatred. It is gratitude expressed through the way one lives. Maximilian's sacrifice became a question placed before the survivor. What will you do with the life that has been given back to you? This question can also reach us spiritually. What will you do with the life you still have? Not in a demanding or anxious way. Not as though you must accomplish something extraordinary to deserve the gift. Perhaps you will forgive one person. Perhaps you will care for your body. Perhaps you will stop hiding your pain. Perhaps you will become gentler with someone who is afraid. Perhaps you will pray for those who cannot pray. Perhaps you will simply remain alive through a difficult season. The life you have is not required to become famous in order to become meaningful. It only needs to become a place where love can continue. Years later, Maximilian's witness was recognized by the Church. He was beatified and eventually canonized by Pope John Paul II, who described him as a martyr of charity. This title is significant. He was not remembered merely as a man who died in a concentration camp. He was remembered as a person who transformed a death sentence into an act of love. The Church's recognition did not create his holiness. It did not make his sacrifice valuable after the fact. It named what had already been lived. This can be comforting for those whose goodness is unseen. There may be no institution that recognizes your sacrifices. No one may know how many times you have chosen patience. No one may understand how difficult it is for you to continue. No one may see the nights when you are frightened and still rise in the morning to care for someone else. But God does not need a public ceremony to know what love has cost you. The hidden offering is not hidden from Him. The world may never applaud your endurance. Heaven does not overlook it. Maximilian is remembered as a patron and intercessor for prisoners, families, people struggling with addiction, those who are persecuted, and all who are threatened by dehumanization. His story speaks especially to anyone who feels trapped. A prison can be made of steel. It can also be made of fear. It can be made of addiction, shame, abusive control, grief, compulsive thoughts, or despair. The saint does not pretend that every prison opens quickly, but he witnesses that a person's soul is not identical to the walls around it. There can be an interior freedom before there is an outward escape. There can be hope before circumstances improve. There can be dignity before other people recognize it. There can be prayer before the answer arrives. Perhaps you feel trapped tonight by thoughts that have become repetitive and cruel. You may be afraid that you will never recover from what has happened. You may feel as though the future has been sealed. Saint Maximilian understands the language of confinement. Let him remind you that the cell is not the whole of your identity. You are more than the place where you are suffering. You are more than the fear passing through your body. You are more than the years you have lost. You are more than the person who hurt you. You are more than the addiction you are fighting. You are more than the diagnosis you carry. Christ sees a person where the world sees a problem. As we return to the image of the boy, Raymond, and the two crowns, the distance between childhood and martyrdom becomes immense. A child sees a white crown and a red crown. He chooses both without understanding the roads between them. The white crown is not only purity in the narrow sense. It is the repeated cleansing of intention. It is the effort to remain truthful. It is the return to prayer after distraction. It is the willingness to let love become more important than pride. The red crown is not only the final blood of martyrdom. It is every moment when love costs something and is still chosen. Maximilian wore the crowns through a lifetime. He wore them when he left home. He wore them when he studied. He wore them when illness limited him. He wore them when he built the city of the Immaculate. He wore them when he entered another country. He wore them when war threatened the community. He wore them when he remained near prisoners. He wore them when he stepped forward for Gajowniczek. The final act was the visible summit of a long, hidden ascent. Your life also contains hidden choices. You may not know which ones are shaping you most deeply. The apology you offered, the bitterness you released, the temptation you resisted, the help you accepted, the morning you got up, the night you did not harm yourself, the decision to call someone trustworthy, the prayer you spoke while doubting, the moment you chose to remain. These may seem small, but they are not nothing. A person becomes who they are through repeated consent. Every day, the heart consents to something. It consents to fear or to trust, to cruelty or to mercy, to isolation or to connection, to despair or to the possibility of hope. The choices are not always dramatic. Often they are almost invisible. But grace works through the invisible. Maximilian's life also teaches that the deepest protection is not always protection from suffering. Sometimes it is protection from becoming the kind of person suffering wants to create. The camp wanted to create hatred. It wanted to create indifference. It wanted to teach prisoners that another person's life was irrelevant. Maximilian resisted by remaining loving. This does not mean that he did not recognize evil. He recognized it clearly. Mercy is not blindness. Love does not require calling cruelty good. Forgiveness does not mean allowing abuse to continue. Christian charity can be firm, discerning, and protective. But evil does not get to decide what happens inside the heart. Perhaps someone has hurt you deeply. Perhaps you are afraid that your pain has made you permanently bitter. Perhaps you have begun to distrust everyone because one person betrayed you. The saint's story does not ask you to pretend that the betrayal did not happen. It asks you to protect your heart from allowing the betrayal to become your entire identity. You can grieve what was done. You can set boundaries. You can seek justice. You can refuse contact where contact is unsafe. And you can still ask Christ to prevent hatred from becoming your home. This takes time. You do not have to forgive on command. You do not have to feel affection for someone who harmed you. You may begin with the smaller prayer. Lord, do not let this pain destroy what is good in me. That is already a prayer of resistance. Maximilian's cell became a place where love was not loud but unmistakable. The men were not rescued by earthly power. The camp did not suddenly become merciful. Yet within the cell, another kingdom was present. A kingdom where the weak were not abandoned. A kingdom where a name mattered. A kingdom where one person could offer himself for another. A kingdom where prayer survived without comfort. A kingdom where death did not have the final authority. This kingdom is still present. It may be present in your room tonight, not as a feeling you can force, but as a reality you can receive. Christ is near to you. The saints are not worshipped in place of Christ. They are friends who point toward him. Maximilian's life points toward the love of Jesus, who gave himself for the world and entered human suffering from within. If you imagine Saint Maximilian near you, let him lead your attention beyond himself. Let him say, in the language of his life, that love is stronger than fear because Christ is stronger than death. Let Mary stand nearby, not demanding words, but offering maternal presence. Let Jesus receive the thoughts you cannot quiet. You may place each worry before him, one at a time. The person you are afraid for, the decision you cannot make, the illness you cannot control, the memory that returns, the loneliness that feels endless, the sleep that has not come. One by one, you may place them in his hands. You do not have to keep taking them back immediately. If you do, place them there again. Prayer is often a repeated act of release. The rosary returns. The breath returns. The name returns. Mercy returns. The night may continue, but you are not carrying it alone. Saint Maximilian died on August 14th, the eve of the Feast of the Assumption. His life ended in a place of imprisonment, but his final direction was toward the open horizon of God. The camp had fences. Mary's hope had no fence. The bunker had walls. Christ's mercy had no wall. The body was confined. The soul was being received. This does not erase the violence of what happened. It gives the final word to God rather than to the people who inflicted it. Every life eventually reaches a moment when external control falls away. We do not know when that moment will come, and we should not spend tonight trying to calculate it. We are not asked to live tomorrow's death. We are asked to live this moment. If you are awake, be awake gently. If you are tired, be tired gently. If you are afraid, be afraid in the presence of Christ. If you cannot sleep, do not turn the lack of sleep into another reason to despise yourself. Rest may come through sleep. It may also come through surrender. Let your body be supported by the bed. Let the room hold you. Let the darkness remain simply darkness, not a prophecy. Let the sounds around you exist without requiring a response. The Lord is not asking you to stand guard over the universe. The Lord is not asking you to solve every danger before dawn. The Lord is not asking you to understand the purpose of every sorrow. He is inviting you to remain with Him. Maximilian's final witness began with one sentence spoken through action. Take me instead. In that offering, he showed the world that love does not always ask, what can I preserve for myself? Sometimes it asks, whom can I protect? You may not be called to make a sacrifice like his. Most people will never stand before a selection of condemned prisoners. But every life contains smaller opportunities to protect another person's dignity. You can refuse to spread humiliation. You can listen to someone who is isolated. You can speak to a child with patience. You can care for an aging parent. You can forgive yourself enough to become more available to others. You can give someone permission to rest. You can remind a frightened person that they are not alone. These acts may never be remembered by history. They are still precious. And perhaps tonight, the person you are being asked to protect is yourself. You may need to protect yourself from the voice that says, you must keep suffering in order to prove that you care. You may need to protect yourself from endless information. You may need to protect yourself from returning to a harmful conversation. You may need to protect yourself from the belief that rest is selfish. You may need to protect your small remaining strength. Self-protection is not always self-centeredness. A person who has been given no rest cannot continue giving love freely. A heart that is constantly attacked cannot remain open without care. Even Jesus withdrew to quiet places. Even the saints needed sleep, food, friendship, and silence. Receive the permission to be human. Saint Maximilian's love was profound because it was rooted in God, not because he denied his humanity. As the story of his life comes toward its end, it does not end in the bunker alone. It continues in every person who hears his name and decides that fear will not be the final authority. It continues in the prisoner who survived. It continues in families who learned of his sacrifice. It continues in those who have found courage through his example. It continues in you tonight. Perhaps you will remember only one sentence when morning comes. Perhaps you will remember that you are not disposable. Perhaps you will remember that a long night is still made of moments. Perhaps you will remember that God does not require you to understand everything before you rest. Perhaps you will remember that Saint Maximilian entered a place of darkness and remained capable of love. Let that be enough. You do not need to memorize his entire story. You only need to receive the direction it gives, toward Christ, toward mercy, toward the dignity of every person, toward the surrender of fear, toward the hope that no prison is larger than God. The walls around you may be real, but they are not eternal. The anxiety within you may be strong, but it is not sovereign. The loneliness you feel may be deep, but it does not mean that you are forgotten. The grief you carry may remain for a while, but it does not mean that joy has been permanently forbidden. The future may be unknown, but it is not outside the hands of God. Saint Maximilian Kolbe knew the meaning of confinement. He knew the weakness of the body. He knew the cost of remaining faithful. And he knew that charity could become a door through which divine freedom entered a place built to destroy it. Tonight, that door may open in a small way within you, perhaps through forgiveness, perhaps through acceptance, perhaps through the decision to ask for help. Perhaps through one quiet prayer. Perhaps through sleep. Do not force the door. Simply remain near it. The Lord is patient. The Lord is not frightened by the darkness. The Lord does not abandon you because you cannot feel His presence. The Lord sees the whole of you, the part that trusts and the part that doubts, the part that hopes and the part that has grown tired, the part that wants to be strong and the part that only wants to be held. All of you may come before Him. There is no need to edit your heart before prayer. Maximilian did not offer God an imaginary version of himself. He offered his actual life with its health, energy, questions, limitations, and fears. You may offer your actual life as well. The actual room, the actual body, the actual mind, the actual night, the actual pain. God is not waiting for a more convenient version of you. He is here now, and if your thoughts begin to wander, let them wander without punishment. If a memory arises, acknowledge it and return gently. If your mind starts counting the hours, place the hours in God's hands. 1 hour, 1 breath, 1 moment. There is no need to hurry. Saint Maximilian did not hurry through his final days. He received each hour as it came, and within those hours he remained near the men entrusted to him. You can receive this hour too. Perhaps you are not yet asleep, but you are no longer entirely alone. Perhaps you still feel anxiety, but you have allowed a little space around it. Perhaps you still feel sadness, but it is no longer the only voice in the room. Perhaps you still have questions, but you are beginning to believe that questions can be carried. This is how peace sometimes begins, not as a sudden absence of pain, as a quiet companionship within pain. The boy Raymond chose both crowns. The friar Maximilian offered his life. The prisoner Maximilian remained free to love. The Saint Maximilian now points beyond himself to Christ, whose mercy is deeper than every human prison and stronger than every fear that visits the night. May that mercy rest upon you now. May it rest upon your mind when thoughts become loud. May it rest upon your body when tension refuses to release. May it rest upon your memories when the past returns. May it rest upon your future when uncertainty frightens you. May it rest upon your home, your family, and those whose names you carry in prayer. And if sleep comes, may you enter it without fear. If sleep delays, may you remain in peace as much as you are able. The night does not need to be perfect in order for God to be present. The room does not need to be bright in order for Christ to be near. The heart does not need to be fearless in order for love to live within it. Saint Maximilian Kolbe entered the darkness, carrying nothing that the world considered powerful. He carried prayer. He carried compassion. He carried the memory of Mary. He carried the freedom to give himself. And that was enough to reveal a light the darkness could not overcome. Epilogue. The room around you may be quiet now. Perhaps the night has changed while you were listening. Perhaps the darkness feels a little less empty. Perhaps the same worries are still present, waiting at the edge of thought. Perhaps sleep has not yet come, and the body still carries the memory of the day. You do not need to judge the night by whether you have already fallen asleep. You have remained here. You have allowed a story of courage and charity to enter your thoughts. You have allowed the name of Saint Maximilian Kolbe to become part of the silence surrounding you. And perhaps, beneath the noise of anxiety, you have remembered something that fear often tries to hide. You are not alone. Saint Maximilian's life began with a child who did not understand the road ahead. Raymond saw the white crown and the red crown, and he chose both without knowing what either would demand of him. He did not receive a complete explanation. He received an invitation. The same may be true for you. You may not know what tomorrow will ask of you. You may not understand why certain burdens have entered your life. You may not know how a relationship will heal, how your body will recover, how your grief will change, or when your heart will feel safe again. You may not see the whole road. You do not have to. The God who guided Maximilian through childhood, study, illness, mission, war, imprisonment, and sacrifice is also capable of guiding you through the next step. Perhaps the next step is not an achievement. Perhaps it is rest. Perhaps it is asking for help. Perhaps it is accepting that you have done enough for today. You are not required to carry tomorrow before it arrives. The child who chose both crowns became a man who learned that love is formed slowly. It is formed through ordinary decisions, repeated prayers, patience with weakness, and the willingness to remain faithful when no one is watching. Perhaps you have been living this kind of hidden faithfulness. Perhaps no one knows how difficult it has been for you to continue. Perhaps you have cared for someone while your own heart was breaking. Perhaps you have gone to work while carrying grief. Perhaps you have tried to be kind while feeling forgotten. Perhaps you have survived days that you once believed would destroy you. Do not dismiss what it has taken to remain here. You may not feel brave, but endurance can be a quiet form of courage. You may not feel holy, but a tired heart that continues to turn toward love is not far from God. You may not feel hopeful, but the desire to find hope is already a small opening through which grace can enter. Saint Maximilian knew the weakness of the body. He knew that plans could be interrupted by illness. He knew what it meant to be limited, dependent, and unable to accomplish everything he desired. So, if your body is tired, let him remind you that you are not a failure. If your body is anxious, let him remind you that you are not abandoned. If your body is ill, let him remind you that your worth has not diminished. Your value is not measured by speed. It is not measured by productivity. It is not measured by how much you can give other people before you need something in return. Before you accomplished anything, God knew you and loved you. Before you became useful, God called you precious. Before you found the strength to continue, God was already near. Saint Maximilian built the city of the Immaculate through ordinary materials: wood, paper, ink, tools, time, labor, and prayer. His great vision took shape through small tasks performed repeatedly. Your healing may also be built from small materials: a glass of water, a quiet room, a conversation with a trusted person, a medical appointment, a boundary that protects your peace, a prayer spoken without feeling, a decision to turn away from one more frightening message, a willingness to forgive yourself for being tired, a night of imperfect rest. Do not despise small beginnings. A soul does not always heal through one dramatic moment. Often, healing comes through returning again and again to what is true. You are loved. You are not alone. You are allowed to receive help. You do not have to solve everything tonight. Saint Maximilian crossed borders and served people whose language and customs were not his own. He knew what it meant to feel like a stranger. He knew that one could be surrounded by people and still carry an interior loneliness that was difficult to describe. If you have felt out of place, remember that God does not require you to belong everywhere. You do not need to be understood by everyone in order to be known by Him. You do not need to win the approval of every person who has misunderstood you. You do not need to explain your whole heart to those who have chosen not to listen. There is a place in God where you do not have to perform. You may come there with your unanswered questions, your complicated memories, your fear of the future, and your weariness from trying to be strong. Mary knows this place. She knew what it meant to receive a future without a complete map. She knew what it meant to protect a child, to flee danger, to endure uncertainty, and to stand beneath a sorrow no mother should have to see. She did not stop being a mother when the road became painful. She remained. Let her remain near you now. You may speak her name if you wish. Mary. You may speak the name of Jesus. Jesus. You may say nothing at all. The presence of love is not dependent upon many words. Saint Maximilian entered the prison as a man who had already learned to see the person in front of him. The camp attempted to reduce people to numbers, but he remembered their humanity. It attempted to create fear and indifference, but he continued to offer compassion. Perhaps you have been made to feel like a number, a patient, a bill, a problem, a burden, a mistake, a failure, a role. But none of these descriptions can contain the whole truth of you. You are a person created in the image of God. You have a name. You have a history. You have a soul. You carry a value that no institution can give and no institution can remove. If another person failed to recognize your worth, that failure belongs to their vision, not to your value. If you have failed to recognize your own worth, mercy is still teaching you to see. And if you are lying awake because shame has become loud, let this be the answer that returns gently. You are not your worst moment. You are not the harm done to you. You are not the fear that visits you. You are not beyond redemption. The cell in which Maximilian died was designed to make the prisoners invisible. Yet within that place, prayer remained. Compassion remained. A name remained. The freedom to love remained. This means that the external conditions of life do not have absolute power over the deepest part of the soul. You may be confined by circumstances, but you are not only your circumstances. You may be surrounded by uncertainty, but you are not without meaning. You may feel trapped in your thoughts, but your thoughts are not the whole of you. You may be awake in the night, but you are not outside the care of God. If you cannot sleep, let the hours be held one at a time. You do not need to conquer the entire night. You do not need to predict how you will feel tomorrow. You do not need to count every minute as evidence that something is wrong. Let this moment be only this moment. Feel the support beneath you. Let the hands rest. Let the face soften as much as it can. Let the shoulders become heavy. If the jaw is tight, allow it to loosen without forcing it. If a thought comes, let it pass without entering into an argument. If a fear returns, place it again in the hands of Christ. You may need to do this many times. That is not failure. Returning is part of prayer. The rosary returns. The breath returns. The name returns. Mercy returns. Saint Maximilian's final act was made for one person. He did not save the entire world in a visible way. He offered himself for a man whose family might otherwise have lost him. One person was enough for love. You are also enough for the attention of God. Your pain is not too small. Your need is not inconvenient. Your prayer is not unimportant. The Lord sees you personally. He sees the part of you that no one else sees. He knows what you have survived. He knows the words you cannot say. He knows the fear beneath your silence and the hope beneath your exhaustion. And He does not turn away. Perhaps tonight, you are the person who needs to be protected. You do not have to give more than you have. You do not have to sacrifice your health to prove that you love others. You do not have to remain in a situation that is harming you in order to appear merciful. You do not have to answer every message, solve every problem, or carry every person's emotions. Christ is the Savior. You are not. You may love deeply without pretending to control the future. You may pray sincerely without monitoring every outcome. You may care for others while allowing yourself to be cared for. The saints do not call us to destroy ourselves. They call us to become free enough to love without being ruled by fear. Saint Maximilian's freedom was revealed in the cell, but it had been growing for years. It grew through the white crown of hidden faithfulness. It grew through the red crown of costly love. Your own freedom may also be growing quietly. Each time you refuse to believe the lie that you are worthless, freedom grows. Each time you ask for help, freedom grows. Each time you refuse to become cruel because you have been hurt, freedom grows. Each time you release one worry into God's hands, freedom grows. Each time you allow yourself to rest without apology, freedom grows. You may not feel different yet. The deepest work often begins before it becomes visible. As the night continues, imagine Saint Maximilian not as someone standing far above you, but as a companion pointing toward Jesus. He does not ask you to admire him from a distance. He asks you to notice the love of Christ, the same love that met him in childhood, sustained him through work, accompanied him through imprisonment, and received him at the end of his earthly life. Let that love be near you now. Let Christ be near the person who feels forgotten. Let Christ be near the person who is afraid of tomorrow. Let Christ be near the person whose body cannot settle. Let Christ be near the person who is grieving someone no one else remembers. Let Christ be near the person who is ashamed to ask for comfort. Let Christ be near you. You do not need to force a feeling of peace. Peace can begin beneath feeling. It can begin as a decision not to fight yourself for the next moment. It can begin as permission to stop searching for answers. It can begin as the quiet knowledge that someone greater than you is keeping watch. The Lord does not sleep. You may sleep because he remains awake. You may rest because he remains faithful. You may place your loved ones in his care because his attention does not weaken when yours does. You may release the day because he can carry what you cannot. Saint Maximilian Kolbe's life ended in darkness, but darkness did not end his life. His charity continued through the memory of the man he saved, through the testimony of survivors, through the church that recognized his holiness, and through every restless heart that hears his story and finds courage to continue. May his intercession accompany you. May he pray for those who feel trapped. May he pray for those who are persecuted. May he pray for families separated by grief or distance. May he pray for those struggling with addiction, shame, or despair. May he pray for anyone who believes that their life has become disposable. And may Mary, the Mother of the Immaculate, draw you gently toward the peace of Christ. You have carried enough for this day. You may release what cannot be solved. You may forgive yourself for what remains unfinished. You may allow tomorrow to remain in tomorrow. You may rest beneath the care of God. If sleep comes, receive it. If sleep waits, remain gently here. The Lord is with you in both. The room is not empty. The night is not abandoned. Your heart is not forgotten. You are held by a love that entered suffering, remained faithful within darkness, and opened a way toward life. And may the Lord give you peace. Amen. This has been Saints for Sleep. Come back soon for more stories of the saints who will accompany you through your nights. Until then, may the peace of Christ dwell in your heart. Rest well.